Edith Edie Palmer Delamere was a 70-year-old woman who led a life that many would describe as anything but ordinary. Born in Zambia to British parents, Edie grew up surrounded by the wild beauty of Africa. She eventually moved to London, where she became a model during the swinging 60s, a time when the city was the epicenter of fashion and culture. Her modeling career brought her into contact with celebrities, artists, and the elite of society. But Edie wasn't content to stay in one place. She married 4 times, each marriage more extravagant than the last, before settling down in Boynton Beach, Florida, a sunny retirement community with an average age of 62 and known for its relaxed atmosphere. Edie was a wealthy divorcee with a reputation for being a bridezilla. She had a taste for the finer things in life, whether it was her collection of designer clothes, her flashy jewelry, or her love for Bentleys. Despite her age, Edie was obsessed with youth. She spent a small fortune on cosmetic procedures to maintain her appearance and often surrounded herself with younger people, particularly men who she would entertain sexually. Her vanity was well known in Boynton Beach, no small thing, where she was often seen in the area's many high-end boutiques and beauty salons. Edie had one child, Leila Palmer Delamere, but their relationship was strained at best. Edie's controlling nature and obsession with her looks made it difficult for Leila to connect with her mother. Leila had spent years living on her own, studying Zen Buddhism in Japan, far away from Edie's shadow. When they reconnected in late 2012, the reunion was rocky. Edie, who was planning her 5th wedding to a much younger man named Richard Rick Lasker, and was more focused on her upcoming nuptials than on mending her relationship with Leila, who she privately said was, quote, an ugly little piglet. In the days leading up to her death, Edie was busy preparing for her wedding, which was to be a grand affair. She spent hours at the spa, getting treatments to ensure she looked her best, and shopped for the perfect wedding dress at high-end stores like Saks Fifth Avenue. But beneath the surface, Edie's life was far from perfect. Her obsession with youth and control over those around her had created deep rifts that, unknown to her, would end in her murder. On the morning of January 15, 2013, Boynton Beach was bathed in the warm glow of the Florida sun, a typical winter day for the quiet retirement community. But inside the upscale home of Edith Edie Palmer Delamere, something was terribly wrong. At around 9:30 a.m., Leila Palmer Delamere arrived at her mother's house, planning to discuss last-minute details for the upcoming wedding. When she entered the home, she immediately noticed how eerily quiet it was. No music playing from Edie's vintage record collection, no sounds of her bustling about. Leila felt a knot form in her stomach. Leila called out to her mother, but there was no response. Growing more anxious, she walked upstairs to Edie's lavish bedroom, a room filled with expensive furniture and walls adorned with photos from her glamorous past. What she found next was the stuff of nightmares. Edie was lying in her king-size bed, naked and lifeless. Her face, which had once been the picture of beauty and youth, was now a haunting sight. She had been shot, and in a gruesome twist, her eyes had been viciously poked out with a ballpoint pen. The shock hit Leila hard. She stood frozen, staring at the horrific scene. Then, in a panic, she grabbed her iPhone and dialed 911, her hands trembling as she struggled to explain what she had just discovered. What the bleep? My mother's bleeping dead. There's blood bleeping everywhere. Gross. Leila's voice was filled with terror and disbelief as she described the scene to the emergency operator. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing the peaceful morning air of the neighborhood. Officers from the Boynton Beach Police Department quickly entered the home, securing the area and instructing Leila to wait outside. Paramedics were close behind, but it was clear there was nothing they could do. Edie was already gone. As Leila stood outside the house, trying to process what had just happened, neighbors began to gather, whispering among themselves, their faces a mix of shock and concern. In a community where the biggest news was usually a neighbor's new Ferrari or an upcoming all-night orgy, the discovery of a brutal murder was unimaginable. Leila was left to grapple with the horrifying reality that her mother was dead, and the question on everyone's mind was, who could have done something so terrible, so brutal? The Boynton Beach Police Department was quick to respond to the scene after Leila Palmer Delamere's frantic 911 call on the morning of January 15, 2013. Detective Gregor Harbinski, a seasoned investigator with over 2 decades of experience, led the team. Harbinski was known for his calm demeanor and sharp eye for detail, qualities that would prove essential in this grisly case. As they arrived at Edie Palmer Delamere's luxurious home, the officers were met with a scene of disturbing violence. The crime scene was nothing short of a nightmare. Edie's bedroom, once a place of opulence, was now the site of a brutal murder. The king-size bed, adorned with satin sheets, was soaked in blood. Edie's lifeless body lay in the center, naked, with a gunshot wound to her chest. But what shocked the officers most were her eyes, brutally poked out of her like a sunny-side-up egg with a ballpoint pen. The sheer brutality of the act pointed to a deep-seated rage, suggesting the killer harbored intense hatred toward Edie. Detective Harpinski and his team began their investigation with a thorough examination of the room. They carefully bagged and tagged evidence, including the blood-stained pen, which was still lying on the floor near the bed. The crime scene unit photographed the room from every angle, capturing the horror in vivid detail. The team also dusted for fingerprints, though the presence of Edie's many sexual visitors and household staff over the years made the task more challenging. Outside, Lila sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket provided by a neighbor, her eyes red from crying. Harbinski knew she would need to be questioned, but first, he wanted to ensure the crime scene was meticulously processed. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was not a random act of violence. The method of murder and the mutilation of the victim's eyes suggested that the killer was someone who knew Edie well, someone with a personal vendetta. Given the brutal nature of the crime, Detective Harpinski contacted the FBI to bring in a criminal profiler. Dr. Camila Kapoor, a renowned psychologist specializing in violent crimes, was called to assist. After reviewing the crime scene and speaking with Harpinski, Dr. Kapoor developed a psychological profile of the killer. She believed the murderer was likely someone close to Edie, possibly a family member or one of her many sexual partners. The killer was driven by jealousy, resentment, and an overwhelming need to assert control over Edie. The act of gouging out her eyes indicated a desire to erase Edie's gaze, perhaps stemming from feelings of inadequacy or a fear of judgment. Dr. Kapoor's profile added a new layer to the investigation. It suggested that the person responsible for this horrific act was not just a cold-blooded killer, but someone deeply disturbed with a complex emotional relationship to the victim. With this new insight, the police turned their attention to those closest to Edie, determined to uncover the identity of the murderer. The police quickly focused their investigation on Lila Palmer Delamere, Edie's estranged daughter. At 34 years old, Lila had spent much of her life living in the shadow of her glamorous and demanding mother. After returning from Japan, where she had been studying Zen Buddhism for several years, Lila had hoped to find some peace, but reconnecting with Edie only seemed to reopen old wounds. Their relationship was strained at best, with Edie constantly criticizing Lila for being ugly and not living up to her standards. Lila had been struggling financially since her return to the U.S. She lived in a modest apartment in West Palm Beach and worked part-time at a local yoga studio, earning just enough to get by. She was known to be quiet and reserved, often keeping to herself. But beneath that calm exterior, those who knew Lila sensed a deep sadness and frustration. Friends noted that Lila was increasingly anxious in the months leading up to her mother's death, and she often spoke about feeling trapped and powerless in her life. The police believed that Lila had a strong motive for wanting Edie out of her life. Years of emotional abuse and feeling overshadowed by her mother's larger-than-life personality could have driven Lila to the breaking point. Moreover, the discovery that her mother was having an affair with her much younger boyfriend, Jake DeCastro, would have been the ultimate betrayal. The police theorized that Lila might have seen the murder as her only way to escape Edie's control and humiliation. Detective Gregor Harbinski brought Lila in for questioning just 2 days after the murder. During the interrogation, Lila appeared nervous but composed. She denied any involvement in her mother's death, stating that she had been at home alone chanting sutras at the time of the murder. However, her alibi was weak, with no witnesses to confirm her whereabouts. The detectives pressed her on her relationship with Edie, particularly her feelings about the affair with Jake, but Lila remained tight-lipped, refusing to engage with their line of questioning. Lila's behavior during the interrogation raised red flags for the investigators. She seemed detached, almost cold, when discussing her mother's death, which they found unusual for someone who had just lost a parent. However, there was no physical evidence directly linking Lila to the crime, and despite their suspicions, the police knew they needed more to build a solid case against her. As the investigation continued, Lila remained a prime suspect, but the lack of concrete evidence meant that the police would have to keep digging. They hoped that further examination of the crime scene and interviews with other people in Edie's life would uncover the truth behind this brutal murder. The investigation into the murder of Edie Palmer Delamere next led the police to Jake de Castro, an 18-year-old with quite the complicated life. Jake, an undocumented immigrant from Argentina, had been living in Boynton Beach for several months by January 2013. He worked odd jobs, including landscaping and dishwashing, earning just enough to get by. Despite his rough circumstances, Jake was known for his charm, particularly with women, and his good looks made him a local heartthrob among the area's many old and sexually frustrated rich women. Jake's relationship with Lila Palmer Delamere, Edie's daughter, was complex. Lila, 16 years older, had taken the vulnerable young Jake in, providing him with a place to stay, some money every now and then, and protection from immigration authorities. In return, Jake offered sex, although he saw the relationship as more transactional than romantic. Jake's dreams were modest. He wanted to build a stable life in America, perhaps save enough money to start his own stand selling empanadas by the beach one day. But his immigration status made everything uncertain. Edie Palmer Delamere's blatant sexual interest in Jake added another layer of tension. According to those who knew them, Edie had developed a lurid fascination with the young man. She was known for her attraction to hot younger men, and Jake was no exception. She had reportedly lavished him with gifts, including Rolex watches and an Armani suit, and had hinted at a future together if he dumped her daughter for her. For Jake, this was a tempting offer. Edie was much wealthier than Lila, and a relationship with her could mean a life he had never imagined, and perhaps even that empanada stand. When the police brought Jake in for questioning, they found him nervous and evasive. He avoided direct answers, often shifting the conversation away from his relationship with Lila. He did, however, admit to having a sexual relationship with Edie, but claimed it was purely physical and that he had never had any love for her, intended to pursue her as long as she would give him things. Jake insisted that he had been with friends on the night of the murder, drinking at a local cantina, but his alibi was weak, with no one able to confirm his whereabouts for the entire evening. The detectives were suspicious of Jake's motives. They knew he had a lot to gain from Edie's death, especially if she had promised him a share of her substantial wealth. But as they pressed him further, Jake remained calm, though clearly uncomfortable. He denied any involvement in Edie's murder, repeatedly stating that he had no reason to harm her. The police, however, weren't convinced. They believed Jake might have been desperate enough to commit the crime, hoping to secure a future that had always seemed out of reach. Despite their suspicions, the police couldn't find any physical evidence linking Jake to the murder. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, and no witnesses placing him at the scene. Jake de Castro remained a person of interest. But without more concrete evidence, the investigators knew they needed to look elsewhere for answers. The investigation into Edie Palmer Delamere's murder also pointed the police toward Rick Lasker, Edie's 45-year-old fiancé. Rick was a local businessman who had met Edie at a charity event in late 2012. Their whirlwind romance quickly led to an engagement, despite their significant 25-year age difference. Friends and neighbors in Boynton Beach described Rick as a man with a charming exterior, but those who knew him better often spoke of his quick temper and financial troubles. Rick had been struggling to keep his business afloat. He owned a small chain of used car dealerships across South Florida, but by January 2013, the business was bleeding money. The recession that had rocked the U.S. economy a few years earlier still had lingering effects, and Rick was desperate for a financial lifeline. When he met Edie, a wealthy widow with a substantial savings and an insatiable sexual hunger for men, it seemed like his problems were over. But their relationship was far from smooth. Despite planning a wedding, Rick and Edie had a contentious relationship. Edie was known for her controlling behavior, often treating Rick more like an employee or sex slave than a partner. The couple frequently argued, especially over the prenuptial agreement Edie insisted on. She wanted to protect her fortune, while Rick, already drowning in debt, saw the prenup as a potential barrier to financial security. Their disagreements became so intense that neighbors reported hearing shouting matches from Edie's home in the days leading up to her death. When the police brought Rick in for questioning, he appeared calm but guarded. He denied any involvement in Edie's murder, claiming that despite their arguments, he genuinely loved her. Rick provided an alibi for the night of the murder, stating that he had been entertaining potential business partners at a strip club in Miami. However, when detectives checked his alibi, they found inconsistencies. The meeting he mentioned was real, but it had ended hours before Edie was killed, leaving a significant gap in Rick's timeline. The police were particularly interested in Rick's potential motive. Edie's wealth was a powerful incentive, especially given Rick's financial woes. If she had died before the wedding, Rick stood to gain nothing due to the prenup. But if he could somehow make her death look like an accident or orchestrate it in a way that benefited him, Rick could walk away with a substantial inheritance. As detectives pressed Rick on these points, his calm demeanor began to crack. He became defensive, insisting that his financial problems were under control and that he had no reason to harm Edie. But the police weren't convinced. They knew Rick had a lot to lose if the marriage didn't go through, and they suspected he might have been willing to take drastic measures to secure his future. Despite their suspicions, the police didn't have enough evidence to charge Rick with the murder. However, his shaky alibi and financial motives kept him firmly in their sights as they continued the investigation. On the morning of January 24, 2013, Boynton Beach was experiencing one of its rare chilly days, with temperatures dipping into the 50s. It was during this unusual cold spell that a significant breakthrough occurred in the investigation of Edie Palmer Delamere's murder. Detective Karen Martins, who had been tirelessly combing through Edie's personal effects, discovered something unusual in Edie's bedside drawer, a torn piece of a handwritten note. The note was crumpled and shoved to the back, as if someone had tried to dispose of it in haste. The note, though incomplete, contained a few lines that caught the detective's attention. The handwriting matched Edie's, and the content hinted at a heated argument. The remaining legible words included Rick, betrayal, will, and an expletive. These fragments suggested that Edie might have been in the process of altering her will or had discovered something unsettling about her fiancé, Rick Lasker. The discovery of this note added a new dimension to the investigation, reinforcing suspicions that the motive for Edie's murder was financial. With this new evidence in hand, the police revisited Rick Lasker's financial records and discovered that he had recently made a large purchase, an expensive engagement ring that he had claimed was a gift for Edie. However, the timing of the purchase was suspicious. Rick had bought the ring just days before Edie's death, despite his well-known financial troubles. This raised the question, was Rick trying to appease Edie, or was it part of a larger plan to manipulate her before her death? The detectives also decided to send the torn note to the lad for further analysis. They wanted to see if they could recover any additional writing on the missing portion, which could provide more insight into Edie's state of mind or her intentions regarding her will. Additionally, they requested a forensic examination of the handwriting to confirm that the note was indeed written by Edie and not forged by someone else. The discovery of the note and the questionable ring purchase put Rick back under intense scrutiny. The police were now more convinced than ever that Rick had something to hide. They increased their surveillance on him, hoping to catch any slip-up that might lead to a confession or more concrete evidence. As the investigation deepened, the police continued to piece together the puzzle, knowing that time was running out to solve the case before it grew cold. The torn note and the engagement ring were pivotal in pushing the investigation forward, but the detectives knew they still needed more to definitively connect Rick to Edie's murder. On the evening of January 30, 2013, as Boynton Beach residents bundled up against the unseasonably cold weather, the police made a crucial breakthrough in the case. After weeks of intense investigation, they had finally gathered enough evidence to identify Edith Edie Palmer Delamere's murderer, her own daughter, Leila Palmer Delamere. Leila, a 34-year-old woman with a troubled past, had always lived in the shadow of her flamboyant and domineering mother. The investigation revealed that Leila had been struggling with deep-seated resentment toward Edie for years. But it wasn't until she discovered her boyfriend, Jake DeCastro, was cheating on her with her own mother that her jealousy and rage reached a fatal boiling point. The police uncovered that Leila had purchased a .38 caliber revolver just days before her mother's death. This fact, combined with the forensic evidence, ballistic tests that matched the bullets found at the crime scene to the revolver, provided the police with the critical link they needed. Furthermore, detectives found Leila's fingerprints on the ballpoint pen used to mutilate Edie's eyes, a detail that revealed the deep hatred she harbored. On the night of Edie's murder, Leila confronted her mother about the affair. Enraged and feeling utterly betrayed, she shot Edie while she was naked in bed, then proceeded to desecrate her body in a fit of blind fury. Her motive was clear. Leila wanted to punish her mother for the ultimate betrayal and eliminate the woman who had overshadowed her entire life. The police arrested Leila at her modest apartment in West Palm Beach. When the officers arrived, she was calm, almost resigned, as if she had been expecting them. She offered no resistance and simply stated, "You bleeping got me." Her reaction was devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the viciousness of her crime. Leila's arrest sent shockwaves through the local community. Edie's fiancé, Rick Lasker, who had initially been under suspicion, expressed his relief but was devastated by the betrayal within the family. Friends and neighbors of Edie, who had once admired her for her larger-than-life personality, were stunned to learn that her own daughter was behind the brutal killing. As Leila was led away in handcuffs, the case that had gripped Boynton Beach was one step closer to being resolved. But for those who knew Edie, the tragedy of her murder at the hands of her own flesh and blood would leave a lasting scar on the community. Leila Palmer Delamere's trial for the murder of her mother, Edith Edie Palmer Delamere, began on July 15, 2013, at the Palm Beach County Courthouse. The trial quickly became the talk of Boynton Beach, with locals following the proceedings closely, eager to see justice served. The prosecution was led by Assistant State Attorney Jennifer Wright-Ponzar, a seasoned prosecutor known for her tough, no-nonsense approach in the courtroom. Wright-Ponzar argued that Leila had coldly and deliberately planned her mother's murder out of deep-seated jealousy and anger. She highlighted the evidence, including the revolver Leila had purchased and the forensic proof linking her to the crime. Wright emphasized how Leila's resentment had been festering for years, culminating in this tragic act of violence. On the other side, Leila's defense attorney, Paul Adams, a well-known public defender in South Florida, painted a different picture. He argued that Leila's mental state had been severely compromised at the time of the murder, driven by years of emotional abuse and manipulation by her mother. Adams suggested that Leila was pushed to the brink, acting in a moment of uncontrollable rage rather than premeditated malice. He called expert witnesses to testify about Leila's history of depression and anxiety, which had worsened after discovering her boyfriend's affair with Edie. Throughout the trial, Edie's friends and former acquaintances filled the courtroom, watching with a mix of sorrow and disbelief. Some had known Edie as a vibrant, if sometimes difficult, personality, and they struggled to reconcile the image of the glamorous socialite with the brutal crime. On August 2, 2013, after just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Leila to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, Leila remained expressionless, while her former boyfriend, Jake DeCastro, who had testified during the trial, looked on with visible relief. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the case, but opinions were divided. Some in Boynton Beach felt that justice had been served, while others believed that Leila's life sentence was too harsh, given the circumstances of her mental health and the toxic relationship with her mother. For Edie's friends and family, the trial's outcome was bittersweet, a reminder of the deep wounds left by the crime. After the trial, life in Boynton Beach slowly returned to normal, but the shadows of Edith Edie Palmer Delamere's murder lingered. Leila Palmer Delamere began serving her life sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Ocala, Florida. Reports indicated that Leila struggled to adjust to prison life, grappling with depression and isolation. Despite her legal team's efforts to appeal the sentence, there was little hope for Leila's release. Jake DeCastro, Leila's former boyfriend, tried to move on with his life. He left Boynton Beach and returned to Argentina, where he started over, away from the scandal that had consumed his life in Florida. In Argentina, Jake kept a low profile, working various odd jobs to make ends meet, far from the wealth and comfort he had sought during his affair with Edie. Rick Lasker, Edie's former fiancé, also tried to rebuild his life. The death of Edie and the subsequent trial had left him financially drained, and he was forced to sell the lavish Boynton Beach home they had planned to share. He moved to a smaller condo in Delray Beach, where he lived a quieter, more subdued life. Rick distanced himself from the social scene that he and Edie had once dominated, becoming something of a recluse. For Edie's friends and acquaintances, the glamorous parties and social gatherings of the past were a distant memory. Her death had cast a long shadow over Boynton Beach's elite circles, and many who had once been close to her found themselves reevaluating their own lives and relationships, seeking to avoid the kind of tragic ending that had befallen Edie and Leila. Brandon Thibodeau was just 18 years old, full of dreams and hope for the future. He lived in Metairie, Louisiana, a quiet suburb of New Orleans. Brandon was a senior at East Jefferson High School, where he excelled in both academics and auto shop. He had a real passion for cars, spending hours working on engines, dreaming of one day opening his own auto repair shop. His friends often saw him with grease-stained hands, tinkering with old cars in his driveway. Brandon lived with his grandmother, a woman who had gone blind and needed his daily care. Despite his age, Brandon took on the responsibility with maturity far beyond his years. He balanced school, a part-time job at a local garage, and caring for his grandmother without complaint. People in the neighborhood often commented on his kindness, noting how he always made time to help out anyone who needed a hand. Brandon had been dating Lee Gerard for 2 years. Lee, also 18, was a smart, driven young woman who shared his dreams of a bright future. They talked about getting married after graduation and starting a family. Brandon often saved his money to take Lee out to nice places like Cafe Boulevard, where they would dream about their future over a nice meal. The couple was inseparable, and everyone expected them to have a long, happy life together. But beneath the surface, there was a dark secret. Brandon was having an affair with Lee's mother, Paula Gerard, a 43-year-old woman who ran a multi-level marketing company called Beauty Buys. Paulette was attractive and successful, but she had a complicated relationship with her daughter, often competing with her for the attention of men. Brandon's affair with Paulette was a secret that weighed heavily on him, and it complicated his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. Despite his dreams and plans, Brandon's life took a tragic turn. His secret affair would soon lead to a shocking and violent end, leaving the community of Metairie stunned and his loved ones devastated by the loss of a young man who had so much potential. On the morning of August 12, 2021, Metairie, Louisiana, was already feeling the oppressive summer heat. Around 8:00 a.m., Brandon Thibodeau's grandmother, Mabel, noticed something was wrong. Mabel, blind and dependent on Brandon for care, hadn't heard him moving around the house that morning. Worried, she called out to him, but there was no answer. She sensed something was off, and despite her disability, managed to dial a neighbor, Mrs. Alice Dupree, for help. Mrs. Dupree, a retired nurse who lived just 2 houses down, rushed over. She had known Brandon since he was a little boy and couldn't imagine anything being seriously wrong. But as soon as she stepped into the house, she felt a chill. The living room was eerily quiet, and there was an unusual metallic smell in the air. Mrs. Dupree called out to Brandon, but the house remained silent. She followed the scent to Brandon's bedroom. As she pushed the door open, the sight before her was unimaginable. Brandon's lifeless body lay sprawled on the floor, practically floating in his own blood. He had been brutally stabbed multiple times, and his eyes were almost gouged out. The knife, still soaked in blood, was on the floor beside him. Mrs. Dupree froze in shock, her hand trembling as she dialed 911. Her voice, usually calm and reassuring, was shaky as she reported the scene to the operator. "Oh, Sheriff, there's blood everywhere," she stammered. Within minutes, police and paramedics arrived at the modest one-story home on West Metairie Avenue. The flashing lights and the crowd of neighbors who gathered outside added to the surreal atmosphere. As the first responders entered the house, they were met with a gruesome scene that would haunt them for years. Mrs. Dupree, who had initially tried to stay calm, was now visibly shaken, leaning on another neighbor for support. Mabel, still in her chair in the living room, kept asking what was happening, unaware of the horror just a few rooms away. The once quiet neighborhood was now the epicenter of a brutal crime, one that would leave everyone reeling. The Metairie Police Department arrived at Brandon Thibodeau's home within minutes of Mrs. Dupree's 911 call on the morning of August 12, 2021. Leading the investigation was Detective Michael Mick Duval, a seasoned investigator with over 20 years on the force. Known for his no-nonsense approach and dedication, Duval was a respected figure in the department. He was joined by Detective Rene Martinez, a younger, sharp-minded officer with a keen eye for detail. As they entered the house, the crime scene was immediately overwhelming. The once cozy bedroom was now a gruesome sight. Blood spattered the walls and floor, creating a chaotic pattern that told a story of extreme violence and desperation. A smell of iron hung thick in the air, mixing with the oppressive heat of the August morning. Brandon's body lay crumpled on the floor, the brutality of the attack evident from the multiple stab wounds and the near gouging of his eyes. The kitchen knife used in the attack, a common but deadly weapon, was found beside him, covered in blood. Detective Duval, despite his years of experience, couldn't help but feel a knot in his stomach as he surveyed the scene. He knew immediately that this wasn't a random act of violence. The ferocity of the attack suggested something deeply personal. This wasn't just a murder, Duval believed. This was a crime of passion. Martinez began photographing the scene, carefully documenting every detail. They collected evidence meticulously, ensuring nothing was overlooked. The knife, the blood patterns, and any fingerprints were all carefully recorded. Forensics would later analyze these to piece together the sequence of events. As they worked, the detectives also noted the state of the rest of the house. The living room, where Brandon's grandmother Mabel sat, remained untouched, a stark contrast to the horror in the bedroom. This indicated that the attack was swift, catching Brandon off guard, possibly during an early morning routine. Outside, the neighbors had gathered, murmuring among themselves, trying to make sense of the tragedy that had struck their quiet community. Detective Duval knew the importance of acting quickly. He assigned officers to canvass the neighborhood, hoping someone might have seen or heard something unusual. In a close-knit place like Metairie, where everyone knew each other, there was always the chance that someone had noticed something that could break the case wide open. The first suspect on Detective Duval's list was Paulette Urard, the mother of Brandon's girlfriend Lee. Paulette was 43 years old and had always been the center of attention in Metairie's social circles. She was known for her striking looks and her successful multi-level marketing company, Beauty Buys, which sold cosmetics and skincare products. Some locals whispered that her business was a scam, but Paulette dismissed the criticism, enjoying the financial rewards in the spotlight. Paulette had a complicated relationship with her daughter Lee. While they appeared close, friends noticed an underlying tension between them, often stemming from Paulette's jealousy of Lee's youth and beauty. Paulette had a habit of competing with her daughter for attention, especially from men. This rivalry took a dark turn when Paulette began an affair with Brandon Thibodeau, her daughter's boyfriend. The affair was a closely guarded secret known only to the two, as it was the kind of secret that could destroy lives. Paulette justified the relationship as a way to reclaim her lost youth, but it was clear to that she was becoming dangerously obsessed with Brandon. When Detective Duval and Detective Martinez brought Paula in for questioning, she was visibly shaken but tried to maintain her composure. She dressed impeccably in a tailored pantsuit, her makeup flawless, but there was a nervousness in her eyes that didn't go unnoticed. The detective started with routine questions, asking about her relationship with Brandon and her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Paulette claimed that she had been home alone, working late into the night on her business. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to her tone when asked about Brandon. She described him as a beautiful boy, but downplayed their relationship, referring to him as just her daughter's boyfriend. However, as the questioning continued, her mask began to slip. When Duval pressed her about the affair, Paulette's demeanor changed. She became defensive, her answer short and clipped. She denied the affair at first, but when presented with evidence of the affair, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed to the affair, but she vehemently denied having anything to do with Brandon's murder. "He was my angel boy," she cried. "Laura is my witness. I would never hurt him." Despite her emotional outburst, Detective Duval wasn't convinced. Her obsession with Brandon and the intense jealousy she harbored toward her daughter made her a prime suspect. The second suspect in the investigation was Lee Urard, the 18-year-old daughter of Paulette Urard and the girlfriend of the victim, Brandon Thibodeau. Lee was a bright, ambitious young woman who had just graduated high school in June of 2021. She was looking forward to starting college in the fall with plans to study business management at the University of New Orleans. Friends and family described Lee as kind-hearted, but sometimes overshadowed by her mother's dominant personality. Lee and Brandon had been dating for 2 years, and by all accounts, they were deeply in love. They had even talked about getting married after Lee finished high school, a plan that had excited both of their families in a conservative southern town where the average age of marriage is 18. However, the revelation of her mother's affair with Brandon had shattered Lee's world. The discovery of the betrayal left her heartbroken and furious, but she claimed that she was innocent of any involvement in Brandon's death. When detectives brought Lee in for questioning, she appeared emotionally drained. Dressed in jeans and a t-shirt from her high school senior class, she seemed much younger than her age, almost childlike in her grief. Detective Duval and Detective Martinez began the interrogation gently, asking her to recount her relationship with Brandon and how she found out about the affair. Lee's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes filled with tears. She described how she had accidentally stumbled upon sexually explicit text between her mother and Brandon a few days before his death. The discovery had led to a heated argument between her and Paulette, but Lee claimed she had tried to move past it. "I loved Brandon, and I didn't want to lose him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. However, When asked about her whereabouts on the night of the murder, Lee's story became less clear. She insisted that she had been at a sleepover at her friend Taylor's house, just a few blocks away from Brandon's house, but she struggled to provide details about the evening. Taylor, when questioned separately, confirmed that Lee had been there but mentioned that Lee had left around midnight, a few hours before the estimated time of the murder. As the detectives pressed Lee further, her demeanor shifted from sadness to defensiveness. She denied any involvement in Brandon's death, but the anger in her voice was evident. "I would never hurt him," she repeated, though her hands trembled as she spoke. When shown evidence of the affair, including Paulette's explicit texts sent to Brandon, Lee broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her grief was raw, but it also raised questions. Was she crying out of loss, or was there something more she was hiding? Despite her emotional state, Lee maintained her innocence throughout the interrogation. She admitted to feeling betrayed and angry, but insisted she wasn't capable of murder. However, her unclear alibi and the intensity of her emotions left Detective Duval with lingering doubts. The third suspect in the investigation was Richard "Golly" Gerard, the 47-year-old father of Lee Gerard and husband of Paulette Gerard. Richard was a successful lawyer, known locally as an ambulance chaser due to his reputation for taking on personal injury cases. He was well known in Metairie, Louisiana, for his sharp legal mind and his ability to win cases, but also for his tendency to be absent from home due to his demanding work schedule. Richard was a man who valued appearances. He took pride in maintaining a picture-perfect family image, even if it meant turning a blind eye to the troubles brewing under his own roof. While Richard was often away of the office or in court, he wasn't entirely oblivious to the tension and game of sexual jealousy between Paulette and Lee. He had his suspicions about Paulette's behavior, particularly her inappropriate sexual interest in other men, but he chose to ignore it, hoping it would resolve itself. When the police called Richard in for questioning, he appeared composed, dressed in a crisp white shirt and tie, as if preparing for a day in court. Detective Duval and Detective Martin started the interrogation by asking Richard about his relationship with his wife and daughter. Richard described his marriage to Paulette as complicated, but insisted that they had a strong bond and had sex regularly. He claimed that his relationship with Lee was also on good terms, though he admitted that they weren't as close as he would have liked, partly due to his long work hours. The detectives then shifted the focus to Brandon Thibodeau. Richard admitted that he liked Brandon and thought he was a good match for Lee. However, when confronted with the affair between Brandon and Paulette, Richard's demeanor changed. He clenched his jaw and avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. He claimed that he was unaware of the affair until after Brandon's death, stating, "If I had known, I would have put a stop to it immediately." The detectives pressed Richard on his whereabouts on the night of the murder. He stated that he had been working late at his office, reviewing a case file for an upcoming trial. He provided the names of colleagues who could vouch for his alibi, but his tone was defensive. Richard's response to the interrogation was calm but distant, giving the impression that he was holding back. As the questioning continued, Richard maintained his innocence, insisting that he had nothing to do with Brandon's death. However, his reluctance to discuss the affair and his apparent detachment from the situation left the detectives uneasy. Was Richard truly ignorant of his wife's actions, or was he hiding something to protect his family's reputation? Despite his calm exterior, Richard's evasiveness during the interrogation raised suspicions. The detectives couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than he was laying on. On a scorching afternoon in mid-August 2021, the police received a tip that would change the course of the investigation. It was around 3:00 p.m. when Detective Duval's phone rang. The caller, who wished to remain anonymous, claimed to have critical information about Paulette Gerard, one of the key suspects in Brandon Thibodeau's murder. The tipster hinted at something more sinister than just an affair, a secret that Paulette had been hiding for years. The detectives wasted no time. They drove straight to Paulette's office, located in a small, nondescript building on the outskirts of Metairie. The sign above the door read Beauty Buys, the name of the multi-level marketing MLM company Paulette had been running for nearly a decade. From the outside, the office looked like any other small business, but inside, the detectives would uncover a shocking twist. As they entered the office, the detectives were struck by the eerie quiet. The place was filled with beauty products, shelves lined with creams, lotions, and makeup, but there were no employees in sight. Detective Martinez noticed the locked door at the back of the office. After some persuasion, Paulette's assistant, a nervous young woman in her early 20s, reluctantly handed over the key. Behind the door was Paulette's private office, and what the detectives found inside was both disturbing and revealing. The walls were covered with photographs, many nude of Brandon, most of them sexually explicit and inappropriate. In one corner, there was a makeshift love shrine dedicated to him, complete with candles, trinkets, and handwritten notes. It was clear that Paulette's obsession with Brandon had gone far beyond a mere affair. But that wasn't all. As the detectives searched the office, they stumbled upon a stack of documents that exposed the dark side of beauty buys. The Manolon scheme was not just a business. It was a scam that preyed on poor Southern women, many of whom were single mothers or struggling financially. The documents revealed that Paulette had been exploiting these women, convincing them to invest thousands of dollars in beauty products they couldn't sell, while forcing them to work up to 20 hours a day to pay off their debts. The financial strain had ruined hundreds of lives, leaving these women in despair. The discovery of Paulette's fraudulent business practices provided a new motive for the murder. Paulette's world was beginning to crumble, and the pressure of maintaining her image, combined with her obsessive love for Brandon, may have driven her to kill. With this new evidence, the police had a clearer picture of Paulette Gerard, a woman who would do anything to protect her secrets, even if it meant committing murder. The detectives knew they were closing in on the truth, but they also realized that uncovering the full extent of Paulette's crimes would be no easy task. On August 21, 2021, the police in Battered, Louisiana, were finally ready to make their move. After piecing together the evidence, including the disturbing findings at Paulette Gerard's beauty buy's office, they had no doubt about who was responsible for Brandon Thibodeau's brutal murder. Paulette, 43, had become increasingly sexually obsessed with her daughter's boyfriend, leading her to commit an unthinkable crime. Paulette Gerard was known as a charismatic and successful businesswoman, running a multi-level marketing MLM company called Beauty Buys. But behind her polished exterior, Paulette was hiding dark secrets. The investigation revealed that she had been having an affair with Brandon for several months. When Brandon tried to end the affair to focus on his relationship with Paulette's daughter, Lee, Paulette's obsession turned deadly. On the night of the murder, Paulette confronted Brandon in the kitchen of his grandmother's house, a place Brandon had taken Paulette to have sex many times. Fueled by jealousy and the fear of losing control, Paulette grabbed the kitchen knife and stabbed Brandon multiple times. The attack was vicious, leaving him with deep wounds and nearly gouged out eyes. After the murder, Paulette tried to cover her tracks, but her obsession with Brandon and her fraudulent business dealings eventually led the police straight to her. The arrest took place in the early morning hours of August 21. The police arrived at Paulette's upscale home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, just as the sun was rising. They knocked on the door, and Paulette answered, still dressed in her silk pajamas, clearly not expecting visitors. The detectives calmly informed her that she was under arrest for the murder of Brandon Thibodeau. Paulette's reaction was a mixture of shock and defiance. She tried to maintain her composure, but the police could see the panic in her eyes. As Paulette was handcuffed and led to the police car, her neighbors watched in disbelief. Many of them had admired Paulette for her business success, not knowing the truth behind her glamorous facade. The news of her arrest spread quickly through the community, and by the time the police car pulled away, the streets were buzzing with gossip. Back at the station, Paulette was booked and placed in a holding cell. The detectives interviewed her, but she denied everything, insisting that she was innocent. However, the evidence against her was overwhelming, and the police were confident they had the right person. The arrest brought a sense of relief to Brandon's family, who had been living in fear and uncertainty since his death. The case was far from over, but with Paulette Gerard in custody, the police were one step closer to achieving justice for Brandon Thibodeau. The trial of Paulette Gerard for the murder of Brandon Thibodeau began on November 8, 2021, at the Jefferson Parish Courthouse in Battered, Louisiana. The case had drawn significant media attention, with local news outlets like the Times-Picayune covering every detail. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to see how the case would unfold. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Mark Tremblay, a seasoned lawyer known for his tenacity in the courtroom. Tremblay, 52, had a reputation for being thorough and relentless, and this case was no exception. From the outset, he painted a damning picture of Paulette as a woman driven by jealousy and obsession. He argued that Paulette had brutally murdered Brandon in a fit of rage after he tried to end their affair, using the physical evidence and testimony from investigators to support his case. Tremblay also exposed Paulette's Vinalum business, beauty buys, as a fraudulent scheme that preyed on vulnerable women, adding to the portrait of her as a manipulative and dangerous individual. On the defense side was attorney Charles Chuck Lemoyne, a sharp and experienced lawyer with a history of defending high-profile clients. Lemoyne, 48, was known for his calm demeanor and ability to create doubt in the minds of jurors. He argued that the evidence against Paulette was circumstantial and suggested that someone else, possibly Lee Gerard, could have committed the crime. Lemoyne also tried to humanize Paulette, portraying her as a loving mother and successful businesswoman who had been unfairly targeted by the media and the prosecution. As the trial progressed, the emotional toll on Brandon's family was evident. His grandmother, who had raised him, attended every session, clutching a worn photograph of Brandon. His girlfriend, Lee Gerard, sat with her father, both of them visibly shaken by the proceedings. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, especially during the testimony of the lead detective, who detailed the gruesome nature of Brandon's injuries and the evidence linking Paulette to the crime. On November 22, 2021, after 2 weeks of testimony and just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Paulette Gerard was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with tears of relief from Brandon's family, while Paulette remained stoic, though the color drained from her face as the words "guilty" echoed through the courtroom. The punishment was handed down on December 1, 2021. Paulette was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was a harsh but fitting end to a case that had shocked the community. For Brandon's family, the verdict brought a sense of justice, but the pain of losing him would never fully heal. The trial had also exposed the dark side of Paulette's business, leading to further investigations into beauty buys and his practices. The sentencing marked the end of one chapter but left many in the community reflecting on the tragedy and its lasting impact. After the trial, life in Metairie, Louisiana, slowly returned to normal, but the shock of Brandon Thibodeau's murder lingered in the community. The close-knit neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business was forever changed. The once bustling Gerard household became quiet. Paulette Gerard's life sentence left a void in the family that was hard to fill. Her husband, Richard Golly Gerard, a successful lawyer, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the scandal and loss weighed heavily on him. He continued his work but withdrew from social circles, avoiding the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed him everywhere he went. Lee Gerard, Paulette's daughter, struggled to move forward. The revelation of her mother's affair with Brandon and the brutal murder had shattered her world. She left Metairie shortly after the trial, enrolling in a college out of state to escape the painful memories. Though she tried to focus on her studies, the trauma was never far from her mind. Friends said she became more reserved, no longer the bright and ambitious girl she once was. The aftermath of the trial also had a significant impact on the broader community. Beauty buys, Paulette's multi-level marketing company, came under intense scrutiny. Investigations revealed the extent of the financial and emotional damage caused by the company, leading to its eventual shutdown. Many women who had invested in the business were left in debt, their lives upended by the scam. Local news outlets like WWO-TV continued to cover the fallout, and the scandal became a cautionary tale about the dangers of predatory businesses. In the end, the trial and its aftermath left a lasting mark on everyone involved. It was a tragic reminder of how quickly lives can be torn apart and how the consequences of one person's actions can ripple through an entire community. Myra Everson was a 25-year-old woman full of life and love. She lived in Bentonville, Arkansas, a small town known for being the home of Walmart, America's #1 retailer. Myra was very creative and loved helping people. She worked at a homeless shelter called Helping Hands and was very passionate about her job. Myra often organized events to raise money and collect donations for the shelter. She was well known in the community for her kindness and dedication. Myra was also very involved in the local art community. She loved painting and often participated in art shows and exhibitions. Her favorite place to visit was the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. She would spend hours there, admiring the works of famous artists and getting inspiration for her own creations. Myra grew up in Bentonville and went to Bentonville High School, where she was an excellent student. She was especially good at English and art. Her parents were Reverend Azazel Everson and Clara Everson. Clara passed away when Myra was only 10 years old, leaving her to be raised by her strict and controlling father. Despite her father's harsh ways, Myra remained optimistic and cheerful. She had a younger sister, Blaira, who she was very close to. Lyra often described Myra as her best friend and biggest supporter. Myra had a close-knit group of friends, including Lily Harrington, who also worked at the homeless shelter. Myra had big dreams for the future. She wanted to open her own art studio where people could come and create art together. She often talked about her plans with excitement, sharing her vision of a space filled with colorful paintings and happy people. In the days before her death, Myra was busy preparing for an art exhibition that was scheduled for the end of October 1992. She was very excited about it and spent a lot of time working on her paintings. Myra's vibrant personality and warm heart made her a beloved member of the Bentonville community. She had a way of making everyone around her feel special and loved. Her sudden and tragic death left a huge void in the lives of those who knew and loved her. On the morning of October 14, 1992, Bentonville, Arkansas, was experiencing a chilly and overcast day. At around 8 o'clock a.m., Myra's friend and co-worker, Lily Harrington, went to Myra's house. They had planned to carpool to work at the Helping Hands homeless shelter, just like they did every day. When Lily arrived, she noticed that the front door was slightly open. Thinking Myra might have stepped out for a moment, she called out her name but received no response. Lily hesitated for a moment, feeling a growing sense of unease. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The living room was eerily quiet, and there was a chill in the air. As she walked further into the house, she saw Myra lying on the living room floor. Lily froze in horror, unable to believe what she was seeing. Myra's face was pale, and her left hand was terribly mangled, with 3 fingers missing. Lily's heart raced as she rushed to check for signs of life, but it was clear that Myra was gone. Overwhelmed by shock and fear, Lily stumbled back and grabbed the kitchen phone to dial 911. Her voice was shaky and full of panic as she described the scene to the dispatcher. She could hardly believe that her friend was dead. The news of Myra's death spread quickly through Bentonville. By the time the police arrived, a small crowd had begun to gather outside her house. The brutal nature of Myra's murder left them with many questions. Why would someone do this to such a beloved member of the community? As the investigation began, the people of Bentonville were left in shock and fear, wondering who could have committed such a terrible crime. The police arrived quickly at Mayor Everson's house on the morning of October 14, 1992. The weather was chilly and overcast, matching the grim mood. Detective Samuel E. Myra, a seasoned investigator known for his thoroughness, led the team. Detective Karen Genora, his sharp and observant partner, was by his side. When the detectives entered the living room, they were met with a disturbing scene. The room was in disarray, with furniture knocked over and items scattered. A blood-stained belt lay on the floor, clearly the murder weapon used to strangle Myra. The sight was shocking even to the experienced detectives. Myra's body showed signs of a violent struggle, and her left hand was horribly mutilated, with 3 fingers ripped off. Detective Myra and Genora carefully examined the crime scene. They documented everything, taking numerous photographs and making detailed notes. They collected the belt and other potential evidence, such as fingerprints and fibers. The detectives also noticed a broken lamp and several books scattered around, suggesting Myra fought hard against her attacker. Forensics teams arrived shortly after to assist with the investigation. They used various tools and methods to gather evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, collected hair and fiber samples, and searched for any other clues that might help identify the murderer. The brutality of the crime indicated a deep personal motive, and the detectives knew they had to work quickly to solve the case. Neighbors and bystanders watched in silence as the police worked. Bentonville was a close-knit community, and the news of Myra's murder had already begun to spread. People were shocked and scared, unable to comprehend why someone would kill such a beloved young woman. Detective Myra interviewed Lily Harrington, who had found Myra's body. Lily was still in shock but managed to provide a detailed account of her discovery. She described how she found the front door ajar and the horrible sight of Myra's lifeless body on the living room floor. Her testimony gave the detectives a clearer picture of the timeline. The investigation team also spoke to neighbors, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual that morning. Some reported hearing raised voices late at night, while others mentioned seeing a strange car parked nearby. The detectives took note of every detail, knowing that even the smallest clue could be crucial. As the day went on, the police continued their investigation, determined to find justice for Myra. The crime scene was methodically combed for evidence, and the detectives began to piece together the tragic events leading to her death. The investigation into Myra Everson's murder quickly turned to her father, Reverend Azazel Everson. Azazel was a well-known figure in Bentonville, Arkansas, respected for his role as a preacher. At 56 years old, he was charming and sociable, often seen as a pillar of the community. However, beneath his outward charm, Azazel had a dark and controlling side that few knew about. Detective Samuel E. Mera and Detective Karen Genora brought Azazel in for questioning on October 15, 1992. They met him at the police station, a stark contrast to the comforting atmosphere of his church. Azazel maintained a calm demeanor, but there was a noticeable tension in his eyes. During the interrogation, the detectives asked Azazel about his relationship with Myra. He spoke fondly of her, but avoided details about their conflicts. However, the detectives knew from Myra's friends that she often clashed with her father. Azazel disapproved of Myra's independence and her love for books, which he saw as a rebellion against his strict beliefs, a common situation in a region where only 31% of women can read. Azazel's alibi was weak. He claimed to have been at home alone on the night of Myra's murder, reading the book of Revelations and preparing his sermon. When asked if anyone could verify his whereabouts, Azazel became defensive, insisting his word should be enough. The detectives pressed further, asking about any recent arguments with Myra. Azazel admitted to a heated disagreement a few days before her death, but downplayed its significance. He said it was a typical father-daughter dispute. However, the detectives knew that Myra had confided in friends about her father's controlling nature and his anger over her reading habits. Despite his outward calm, Azazel showed signs of nervousness. He fidgeted with his hands and avoided direct eye contact. But detectives noted these behaviors, sensing there was more beneath the surface. Azazel's motive seemed clear. He wanted to control Myra's life and eliminate anything he saw as a threat to his authority. To gather more evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for Azazel's house. Inside, they found a hidden room in the basement. The room contained disturbing items, including restraints and various books on punishment and control. This discovery painted a darker picture of Azazel's true nature and his obsession with dominance. As the investigation continued, Azazel remained a prime suspect. His secretive and controlling behavior, combined with his weak alibi and the hidden room, made him a focal point for the detectives. They knew they had to keep digging to uncover the full truth behind Myra's tragic death. As the investigation into Myra Everson's murder continued, the detectives turned their attention to Janice Lovias. Janice was a 59-year-old oil driller from Oklahoma known for her determination and resourcefulness. She had a reputation for uncovering difficult truths and was known for her tenacity in the male-dominated field of oil drilling. On October 17, 1992, Detectives Samuel E. Mera and Karen Genora traveled to Oklahoma to interview Janice. They met her at her modest home, which was filled with mementos from her work and travels. Janice greeted them with a firm handshake, her eyes sharp and inquisitive. During the interview, Janice spoke openly about her relationship with Myra. She admitted that they had become close friends and had even formed a sexual relationship. Janice revealed that Myra had hired her to kill Reverend Azazel Everson after he beat her for reading a novel by the novelist Joyce Lehman. Janice explained that she had grown protective of Myra and wanted to help her escape her father's control. When asked about her whereabouts on the night of Myra's murder, Janice provided a solid alibi. She was working on an oil rig out in West Texas and had several coworkers who could confirm her presence. Despite her strong alibi, the detectives were intrigued by her connection to Myra and her deep-seated hatred for Azazel. Janice described Azazel as a cruel and manipulative man who used his position as a preacher to control and abuse his daughter. She spoke passionately about how she wanted to free Myra from his grasp. Although she admitted to planning to kill Azazel, she insisted she had nothing to do with Myra's murder. Throughout the interview, Janice remained calm and composed. She answered the detectives' questions directly and showed no signs of nervousness. Her demeanor and clear alibi made it difficult for the detectives to connect her directly to the murder. However, her close relationship with Myra and her intense dislike for Azazel kept her on their radar. As the investigation into Janice continued, the detectives knew they had to explore every angle. Her strong alibi and open demeanor contrasted sharply with the disturbing nature of the crime, leaving the detectives with more questions than answers. They remained determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Myra Everson. On October 20, 1992, Bentonville was experiencing a crisp, clear morning. At around 9 a.m., a local jogger was running along a wooded trail near Myra Everson's home. As he made his way through the path, he noticed something unusual in the bushes. Curious, he stopped to take a closer look and discovered a small, blood-stained bag partially buried under some leaves. He quickly called the police, and Detective Samuel E. Myra and Detective Karen Genora arrived at the scene shortly after. They carefully retrieved the bag and examined its contents. Inside, they found 3 severed fingers wrapped in a piece of cloth. The detectives immediately realized these were likely Myra's missing fingers. The discovery of the bag and fingers was a significant breakthrough in the case. The detectives meticulously documented the evidence and sent the bag to the forensics lab for further analysis. The lab confirmed that the fingers belonged to Myra, and the cloth was identified as part of a shirt belonging to Reverend Azazel Everson. The detectives interviewed Brian Daniels to gather more information about the discovery. Ryan described how he stumbled upon the bag while jogging and noted that he hadn't seen anyone suspicious in the area. His account was clear and straightforward, providing the detectives with a better understanding of how the evidence had been hidden. With this new evidence, the detectives turned their attention back to Reverend Azazel Everson. They believed the discovery of the fingers and the cloth linked him more closely to the crime. They obtained a search warrant for his home and conducted a thorough search. Inside Azazel's bedroom, they found a blood-stained shirt that matched the cloth found in the bag. This discovery further implicated Azazel in Myra's murder. The police also re-interviewed Lee Harrington, Myra's friend who had found her body. Lee recalled that Myra had been worried about her father's increasingly erratic behavior in the days leading up to her death. Myra had confided in Lee about her fear that her father might harm her. This testimony, combined with the new evidence, strengthened the case against Azazel. Detectives E. Myra and Genora knew they were getting closer to solving the case. The discovery of the bag and the forensic evidence provided crucial links that pointed towards Azazel as the prime suspect. The detectives continued to gather evidence, determined to bring justice to Myra Everson and uncover the full truth behind her tragic death. As the investigation into Myra Everson's murder progressed, Detectives Samuel E. Myra and Karen Genora discovered another tragic connection. On October 22, 1992, they received a report about the murder of Faria Haddon, a 28-year-old woman living in the nearby town of Fayetteville. Faria, like Myra, had been strangled with a belt, and 3 fingers were ripped off her left hand. Faria was known for her ambition and dedication to her work as an escort. She was discreet about her job, but had been in a secret relationship with Reverend Azazel Everson for over a year. Detectives E. Myra and Genora quickly realized the connection between the 2 murders and decided to investigate further. They traveled to Faria's apartment, a small but tidy place decorated with simple but elegant furnishings. Inside, the crime scene was eerily similar to Myra's. The living room showed signs of a struggle, with furniture overturned and a blood-stained belt lying on the floor. Faria's body was found in the same manner as Myra's, with her fingers missing. Detectives interviewed Faria's neighbors and acquaintances. They learned that Faria admired Azazel's charisma and saw him as her escape from a life of poverty. She had confided in a close friend about her relationship with Azazel. The friend described Faria as a hopeful and driven person who wanted a better life for herself. The detectives also found a diary in Faria's apartment where she had written about her relationship with Azazel. The diary entries revealed that Faria had discovered something disturbing about Azazel's secret life. She had found evidence linking him to illegal drug running and was planning to confront him. This discovery provided a possible motive for her murder. During the investigation, the detectives interrogated Azazel again. He was visibly more nervous this time, but he maintained his innocence. He admitted to knowing Faria, but denied any involvement in her death. His alibi for the night of Faria's murder was weak, just like his alibi for Myra's murder. Despite Azazel's denials, the detectives continued to dig deeper. They cross-referenced evidence from both crime scenes and found striking similarities. The belts used in both murders were of the same brand and size, and the method of strangulation was identical. The detectives also found fibers from Azazel's clothes on both victims, further implicating him in the crimes. The investigation into Faria's murder added a new layer of complexity to the case. The detectives were now dealing with a serial killer who had targeted 2 women connected to Azazel. They knew they had to act quickly to prevent any further tragedies and bring the murderer to justice. On October 25, 1992, Bentonville, Arkansas, woke up to a cool, rainy morning. Detective Samuel E. Meira and Detective Karen Genora had just received a breakthrough in their investigation. Forensic analysis of the evidence from both Myra Everson and Faria Haddon's murders pointed to a new suspect, Mark David Lilius, the husband of Jannalise Lilius. Mark David, a 61-year-old traveling revivalist preacher, was known for his charismatic sermons. However, his public persona hid a dark secret. He was leading a double life as a serial killer. He had carefully constructed an alibi by frequently traveling, which made it difficult to connect him to the crimes initially. Detective E. Meira and Detective Genora pieced together that Mark David had murdered Myra to prevent her from exposing his double life. Myra had discovered incriminating evidence against Mark David through his wife, Jannalise, with whom she had a sexual relationship. Faria had also found evidence of Mark David's involvement in Myra's affair and planned to confront him. To silence her, he killed her in the same brutal manner. The detectives coordinated with local police in Tulsa to track down Mark David. On the evening of October 25, they located him at a revival meeting he was hosting. The weather was stormy, with heavy rain pounding on the roof of the small church where he happened to be preaching. The police moved in quietly, not wanting to alarm the attendees. Mark David was taken into custody without resistance. He seemed surprised by the arrest but remained calm. At the police station, he was interrogated by detectives E. Meira and Genora. Initially, he denied any involvement, but the overwhelming evidence against him quickly broke down his facade. He confessed to the murders, explaining that he killed Myra and Faria to protect his secret life as a serial killer. He believed that if his double life were exposed, it would ruin his reputation and his wife's trust. His calm demeanor during the confession was chilling, revealing the cold and calculating nature of his crimes. The arrest of Mark David Lilius brought a mix of relief and sorrow to Bentonville. Myra's family, devastated by the loss, expressed a sense of closure knowing the murderer was caught. Faria's friends and family also found some peace in the justice served. The detectives felt the sense of accomplishment, but were also saddened by the brutal nature of the crimes. They had worked tirelessly to bring justice to Myra and Faria, and now their efforts had paid off. Bentonville could begin to heal, knowing that the person responsible for these heinous acts was behind bars. In June of 1994, the trial of Mark David Lilius, the murderer of Myra Everson and Faria Haddon, began in Bentonville, Arkansas. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Sarah Jane Kersey, a seasoned lawyer known for her dedication to justice. The defense attorney was Robert Luley, a skilled lawyer with a reputation for defending high-profile cases. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to see justice served for the victims. Myra's family, including her sister Lyra Everson, sat in the front row, their faces filled with a mix of grief and determination. Faria's friends and supporters were also present, showing solidarity with her memory. During the trial, the prosecution presented a compelling case against Mark David Lilius. They called witnesses, including Detective Samuel E. Meira and forensic experts, to testify about the evidence linking Mark David to the murders. They also played recordings of Mark David's confession, highlighting his chilling admission of guilt. District Attorney Kersey argued that Mark David's motive for the murders was to protect his double life as a serial killer. She painted him as a cold and calculating individual who was willing to kill to preserve his reputation and keep his secrets hidden. Her impassioned closing argument resonated with the jury and the spectators alike. Defense attorney Robert Luley attempted to create doubt in the minds of the jurors. He questioned the reliability of the evidence and argued that Mark David's confession may have been coerced. He also portrayed Mark David as a devoted man of faith and pillar of the community, trying to humanize him in the eyes of the jury. After several weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Mark David Lilius was found guilty on all counts of murder. The courtroom erupted in applause as the verdict was read aloud. Myra's family embraced each other, tears of relief stringing down their faces. Faria's friends hugged each other tightly, finding solace in the knowledge that justice had been served for their friend. Mark David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought closure to the families of Myra and Faria, knowing that Mark David would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The trial and sentencing of Mark David Lilius marked the end of a long and painful chapter for Bentonville. The community could finally begin to heal, knowing that the person responsible for the murders had been held accountable for his actions. After the trial and sentencing of Mark David Lilius, life in Bentonville began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Myra Everson and Faria Haddon were remembered fondly by their loved ones, who found solace in their memories. For Myra's family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, but the pain of her loss lingered. Her sister, Lydia Everson, continued to honor her memory by volunteering at the homeless shelter where Myra had worked. Lydia found comfort in helping others, knowing it was what Myra would have wanted. Various friends organized the memorial event in her honor, inviting members of the community to share their memories of her. They created a scholarship fund in her name to support young women pursuing higher education, a cause that Faria had been passionate about. Detectives Samuel Imera and Karen Genora were hailed as heroes for their tireless efforts in solving the case. They received awards for their dedication to justice and continued to serve the community with distinction. As for Janelise Lilius, she struggled to come to terms with the truth about her husband's crimes. She distanced herself from the media attention surrounding the trial and focused on rebuilding her life. Despite the betrayal she felt, she found solace in the support of friends and family. The people of Bentonville rallied together in the aftermath of the trial, united in their determination to move forward. They held fundraisers and community events to support the families of the victims and to raise awareness about domestic violence and the importance of seeking help. Bentonville, once haunted by tragedy, emerged stronger than ever, a testament to the power of unity and justice. Samantha Huang, a 28-year-old personal assistant, lived a life that seemed straight out of a glossy magazine. Residing in the affluent town of Walnut Creek, Samantha was renowned for her opulent lifestyle, adorned in the finest designer clothing and indulging in a world of luxury. Her presence was a constant spectacle, capturing the attention of those who craved a glimpse into her seemingly perfect existence. Behind the facade of confidence, however, Samantha battled deep-rooted insecurities and an insatiable craving for validation. Her relentless pursuit of attention fueled her personal and professional life, propelling her towards success while leaving a trail of envious acquaintances in her wake. Samantha's life was a captivating blend of glamour and ambition. She frequented trendy restaurants, mingling with influential figures in the fashion and entertainment industry. Her social circle boasted celebrities, socialites, and power players, all eager to bask in the radiance of her charismatic persona. As we dig deeper into Samantha's life, we uncover the intricate web of relationships that surrounded her. Rumors of a love triangle emerge, pitting Samantha against two individuals vying for her affections. The tension and jealousy that simmered beneath the surface would ultimately lead to a devastating outcome. On the chilling evening of November 17, 2002, tragedy struck the quiet town of Walnut Creek, California, as the lifeless body of Samantha Huang, a 28-year-old personal assistant, was discovered under mysterious circumstances. The rain poured relentlessly, adding to the somber atmosphere that engulfed the crime scene. It was around 7:30 p.m. when Patty Snarlbrook, a 91-year-old passerby, unintentionally stumbled upon the horrifying sight that would forever haunt her. As Patty made her way home, her frail frame braving the elements, she noticed a peculiar disturbance near a dimly lit park. Curiosity piqued, she approached cautiously, her heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and curiosity. As Patty drew closer, her eyes widened in shock and disbelief. There, lying on the cold, wet pavement, was the lifeless form of Samantha Huang. The scene was reminiscent of a noir film, with the raindrops falling like tears from the sky, mirroring the sorrow felt by those who would soon learn of Samantha's tragic fate. Patty, a woman of advanced age but sharp intellect, immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Panic set in as she fumbled for her cell phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. Her voice quivered as she relayed the grim discovery to the emergency operator, her words punctuated by the sound of raindrops hitting the pavement. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the air, signaling the arrival of the authorities. The scene quickly transformed into a hive of activity as police officers and forensic experts descended upon the crime scene. Yellow crime scene tape was stretched across the alleyway, marking it as a place of tragedy and intrigue. As investigators meticulously combed through the evidence, the media frenzy surrounding the case intensified. The murder of Samantha Huang had become a captivating mystery that captivated the Bay Area, leaving no one untouched by its chilling implications. The police wasted no time in responding to the report of Samantha Huang's lifeless body. Detectives Julian Laughlin and Carolina Ramirez arrived at the scene, their faces grim with determination. The rain poured down relentlessly, adding to the somber atmosphere that hung over the crime scene. The location where Samantha's body was discovered was a secluded spot in a Walnut Creek park. The park, usually a place of tranquility and leisure, had now become the center of a macabre investigation. Yellow police tape cordoned off the area, preventing curious onlookers from getting too close. As the detectives approached the crime scene, they could see the unmistakable stain of blood on the ground. It was a chilling sight, a stark contrast against the wet grass and fallen leaves. The rain had washed away some of the evidence, but there were still enough clues for the investigators to work with. The first step was to secure the area and ensure that no evidence was disturbed. Detective Laughlin carefully placed markers next to each significant item, meticulously documenting their position. He then directed the crime scene technicians to begin their work. The forensic team, dressed in white protective suits, started their search for clues. They meticulously combed through the area, collecting samples of the soil, leaves, and any other potential evidence. Every step was taken with utmost care, as even the smallest detail could prove crucial in solving the case. Detective Ramirez focused her attention on Samantha's personal belongings. She carefully examined the victim's handbag, searching for any items that may provide insight into her life and potential motives for her murder. Among the contents, she found a receipt from a local jewelry store, indicating that Samantha had recently purchased an expensive necklace. Could this purchase be connected to her untimely demise? Meanwhile, Detective Laughlin interviewed witnesses who frequented the park. He spoke to joggers, dog walkers, and anyone who might have seen something out of the ordinary on that fateful day. One witness mentioned seeing a suspicious-looking man lurking near the crime scene, but his description was vague, leaving the detectives with more questions than answers. As the investigation progressed, the detectives faced the challenge of piecing together the puzzle of Samantha's murder. With each passing day, the pressure mounted to solve the case and bring justice to Samantha and her grieving loved ones. Dan Tearsbeek, a 32-year-old business executive, found himself at the center of a storm of suspicion surrounding the tragic murder of Samantha Huang. Known for his charm and influential connections, Dan was no stranger to the glitz and glamour of the high-flying lifestyle that Samantha reveled in. However, beneath his polished exterior, a web of secrets and guilt threatened to unravel. As the investigation unfolded, the police focused their attention on Dan, meticulously dissecting his every move and motive. The media frenzy surrounding the case only intensified the scrutiny on him. Reporters camped outside his upscale apartment building, eager to capture any glimpse of the man who was entangled in this deadly love triangle. In the interrogation room, Dan's carefully crafted facade began to crack. Under the relentless questioning of Detective Laughlin, beads of sweat formed on Dan's forehead, betraying his inner turmoil. The detective pressed him on the nature of his relationship with Samantha, the extent of their involvement, and any potential motive for her murder. Dan's voice trembled as he denied any wrongdoing, insisting that he had nothing to do with Samantha's untimely demise. He recounted their passionate affair, painting a picture of a torrid love affair that had consumed them both. He spoke of the nights spent at exclusive restaurants, the lavish gifts he showered upon her, and the trips they took to Hawaii and Las Vegas. But the detectives were not easily swayed by Dan's words. They delved deep into his financial records, uncovering a series of suspicious transactions that raised eyebrows. Large sums of money had been transferred from his accounts in the weeks leading up to Samantha's murder. The police wondered if these funds were used to hire a hitman or to cover up any evidence of his involvement. But amidst the media frenzy, justice remained the ultimate goal. The detectives meticulously gathered evidence, leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of the truth. They were determined to unveil the dark secrets that lay hidden beneath the glossy surface of Samantha's glamorous life. In the investigation into the tragic murder of Samantha Huang, another suspect emerged, Emily Tearsbeek, the 34-year-old wife of Dan Tearsbeek. Emily seemed to embody the picture-perfect suburban wife, with her neatly manicured lawn, charming smile, and her beloved chihuahua, Carl J. Wertheimer. However, beneath her demure facade, a seething rage towards Samantha lurked. Emily saw Samantha as a threat to her marriage. a woman who had captivated her husband's attention and shattered the tranquility of their once harmonious life. Consumed by jealousy, Emily meticulously devised a plan to eliminate her romantic rival, leaving no stone unturned in her quest for vengeance. The police, led by detectives Julian Laughlin and Carolina Ramirez, delved into Emily's background, seeking to uncover the truth behind her seemingly innocent exterior. They discovered a woman who had meticulously crafted a facade of suburban bliss, but harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Samantha. As the investigators delved deeper, they discovered a trove of evidence that pointed towards Emily's involvement in Samantha's murder. They found a series of incriminating text messages exchanged between Emily and a mysterious contact known only as R. These messages revealed a sinister plot to poison Samantha with a lethal dose of arsenic, cunningly laced in her favorite champagne. The journal contained chilling entries, describing in meticulous detail the steps Emily had taken to ensure Samantha's demise. During the police interrogation, Emily's demeanor oscillated between calm denials and moments of intense anger. She vehemently denied any involvement in Samantha's death, claiming the texts and the journal entries were a private fantasy meant to relieve her anger. But her carefully constructed facade began to crumble under the intense interrogation against her. As the investigation continued, the detectives meticulously pieced together the puzzle, connecting the dots between Emily's motive, her actions, and the tragic outcome. The police published a preliminary investigation report, written at a fourth-grade vocabulary level of the insured that even the youngest readers could understand the gravity of the situation. As the investigation into Samantha Huang's murder continued, a surprising suspect emerged from the shadows. Tiffany Watson, a 25-year-old receptionist and co-worker of Samantha. Tiffany's resentment towards Samantha's success and glamorous lifestyle had been simmering beneath the surface for months, and now the police had reason to believe that her envy had driven her to commit a heinous crime. Tiffany, with her long brown hair and piercing blue eyes, seemed like an unlikely suspect. She often wore a fake smile and spoke in a soft, innocent voice that could easily deceive those around her. But the detectives saw through her facade and were determined to uncover the truth. During the police interrogation, Tiffany's demeanor shifted between feigned innocence and veiled hostility. She tried to downplay her rivalry with Samantha, claiming that they were just co-workers and that she had no reason to harm her. But the evidence told a different story. The detectives discovered that Tiffany had been secretly stalking Samantha for months. She had meticulously collected newspaper clippings and magazine articles featuring Samantha's success, pinning them to a corkboard in her small apartment. The board was covered in red string, connecting the articles in a web of envy and obsession. Furthermore, the detectives found a diary hidden under Tiffany's mattress. Its pages were filled with delirious, sexually explicit and disturbing entries detailing Tiffany's growing hatred and sexual attraction towards Samantha. She wrote about how Samantha's designer clothes and luxurious lifestyle made her feel inferior and how she would do anything to bring Samantha down. The detectives also uncovered a receipt from a local pharmacy dated November 10, 2002. The receipt showed that Tiffany had purchased a bottle of arsenic, the same deadly poison that had ended Samantha's life. The detectives also found traces of arsenic in Tiffany's apartment, linking her directly to the murder. As the evidence mounted against her, Tiffany's composed demeanor began to crumble. She became more agitated, her voice trembling as she continued to deny any involvement in Samantha's death. She claimed she had bought the bottle of arsenic to kill herself. The investigation into Samantha Huang's murder had taken a dark turn, revealing how love, envy, and betrayal that can exist together within the human heart. The detectives' relentless pursuit of justice had brought them closer to the truth, but there were still unanswered questions. What other secrets lay hidden beneath the surface? After an intense and painstaking investigation, the truth behind Samantha Huang's untimely demise finally was unveiled. The culprit responsible for this heinous crime was none other than Emily Tearsbeek, the wife of Samantha's wealthy lover, Daniel Dan Tearsbeek. Emily, a seemingly ordinary 34-year-old woman, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Samantha. She perceived Samantha as a threat to her marriage and meticulously devised a plan to eliminate her romantic rival. Consumed by a toxic mix of jealousy and betrayal, Emily cunningly poisoned Samantha with a lethal dose of arsenic, cleverly laced in her favorite champagne. The police, led by detectives Julian Laughlin and Carolina Ramirez, left no stone unturned in their quest for justice. Their relentless pursuit of the truth led them to uncover crucial evidence that ultimately pointed to Emily as the mastermind behind this chilling murder. As the investigation intensified, the detectives interrogated Emily, unmasking her manipulative nature and her willingness to go to extreme lengths to eliminate her competition. Emily's responses ranged from calm denials to moments of intense anger, painting a complex portrait of a woman driven by envy and consumed by her own dark desires. The arrest of Emily Thiersbeek sent shockwaves through the wealthy community of Walnut Creek, California, leaving friends and neighbors stunned by the revelation that a seemingly ordinary woman could be capable of such a heinous act. Samantha's family, though devastated by their loss, found solace in the fact that justice had been served. As the trial of Emily Thiersbeek looms on the horizon, the community eagerly awaits the day when she will face the consequences of her actions. In the end, Samantha's vibrant spirit lives on, a reminder of the tragic consequences that can arise from the darkest corners of the human psyche. The legacy of this case will forever serve as a cautionary tale, reminding us all of the importance of trust, loyalty, and the devastating consequences that can arise when these values are forsaken. The trial that ensued after Samantha Huang's tragic murder in November 2002 captivated the area, with media outlets like KGO and CanTV closely following the proceedings. Emily Thiersbeek, the mastermind behind the twisted plot to eliminate her husband's mistress, stood at the center of the courtroom, her fate hanging in the balance. In a packed courtroom, the prosecution presented a meticulously crafted case against Emily, led by the formidable prosecutor Tabitha Quasimodo. Quasimodo, known for her tenacity and unwavering dedication to justice, left no stone unturned in her pursuit of the truth. She skillfully weaved together witness testimonies, forensic evidence, and a compelling narrative that painted Emily as a calculating and cold-blooded murderer. The defense attorney, Michael Laraboots, fought tirelessly to protect his client's interests. Laraboots, renowned for his ability to sway juries with his persuasive arguments, employed every legal tactic in his arsenal to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. He called into question the reliability of the evidence, challenged the credibility of witnesses, and attempted to create a narrative that placed the blame elsewhere. Samantha's family, clad in somber attire, sat in the front row, their eyes fixed on the proceedings. The weight of their loss was palpable, and their hope for justice was intertwined with a sense of grief that seemed insurmountable. The courtroom itself buzzed with tension, as the public and media awaited the verdict that would determine Emily's fate. After weeks of gripping testimony and impassioned arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. Their decision would shape the lives of both the victims and the perpetrators' families, and the nation held its breath in anticipation. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Emily Thiersbeek was found guilty on all charges. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the courtroom as the gravity of the decision sunk in. Samantha's family, though relieved that justice was served, struggled to find solace in the knowledge that their beloved daughter and sister could never be brought back. The sentencing phase of the trial commenced, and emotions ran high. The prosecution argued for a sentence that reflected the heinous nature of the crime, citing the pain and suffering inflicted upon Samantha and her loved ones. The defense, on the other hand, pleaded for leniency, highlighting Emily's lack of prior criminal history and her potential for rehabilitation. Ultimately, the judge, Honorable William Galville Gavelson, delivered the sentence. Emily Thiersbeek was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief, anger, and sadness. The impact of the verdict reverberated through the lives of all those involved, leaving a lasting scar that would never fully heal. As the trial concluded, the media frenzy surrounding the case gradually subsided, but the memory of Samantha Huang and the chilling tale of betrayal, jealousy, and revenge would forever remain etched in the annals of crime history. In the aftermath of the highly publicized trial, the lives of those involved in the Samantha Huang murder case took unexpected turns. For Daniel Dan Thiersbeek, the wealthy businessman who had been entangled in a deadly love triangle, life would never be the same. The trial had exposed his infidelity and shattered his marriage to Emily Thiersbeek. Dan, now a recluse, was rarely seen in public, preferring to spend his days in his secluded mansion overlooking the picturesque hills of Walnut Creek. His once thriving business empire had crumbled under the weight of scandal, leaving him a shadow of his former self. Meanwhile, Emily Thompson, the mastermind behind the twisted plot, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her days were now spent behind cold steel bars, contemplating the consequences of her actions. The monotony of prison life was a stark contrast to the glamorous world she had once inhabited. The media circus that had surrounded the trial had moved on to other sensational stories, leaving Emily to face the harsh reality of her choices alone. As for Samantha's family, the wounds of her untimely death were still fresh. They had found solace in each other's company and the support of their close-knit community. The Samantha Huang Foundation, established in her memory, had become a beacon of hope for victims of domestic violence. Through their tireless efforts, the foundation provided resources and support to those in need, ensuring that Samantha's legacy lived on. The police officers who had tirelessly worked on the case, Detectives Julian Laughlin and Carolina Ramirez, were commended for their dedication and professionalism. Their meticulous investigation had brought justice to Samantha and closure to her grieving family. Their names would forever be etched in the annals of crime history, remembered as the heroes who had unraveled the truth behind the chilling murder. As the years passed, the Samantha Huang murder case faded from the headlines, becoming a distant memory for most. The once bustling streets of Walnut Creek returned to their peaceful existence, with residents going about their daily lives. The scars left by the tragic events of November 2002 would always remain, a reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that can lurk within the human heart. Katia Powell, a 29-year-old woman from Eupora, Mississippi, was known as the psychic and astrologer of her community. She had a deep connection with the spiritual world and was highly regarded by those who sought her guidance. Katia's father, Reverend Vance Weiss Powell, a Baptist minister from the neighboring town of Mathiston, had a complicated relationship with his daughter's work. He believed that her abilities were influenced by evil forces despite their close bond. Katia was a proud Aries and an active participant in the world of Dungeons & Dragons, where she embraced the persona of Lysandra Dragonslayer. She immersed herself in her work, with aspirations of expanding her psychic abilities. As January of 2008 rolled in, she was determined to take her skills to new heights. Eupora, a small town in Mississippi, was abuzz with excitement for the new year. The community was still recovering from the aftermath of the devastating tornado that had struck the region the previous year. The local newspaper, the Webster Progress-Times, reported on the progress made in the town's recovery efforts. It highlighted the resilience of the community and the hope that the new year brought. Katia's clients, who came from all walks of life, relied on her guidance to navigate the uncertainties of the future. She had gained a reputation for her accurate predictions and insightful readings. Her name was often mentioned in conversations at the local Eupora coffee house, where townsfolk gathered to discuss the latest happenings. However, not everyone in Eupora was a believer in Katia's abilities. Some skeptics dismissed her as a charlatan, claiming that her predictions were nothing more than lucky guesses. This skepticism only fueled Katia's determination to prove herself and silence her critics. As the days passed, Katia's dedication to her craft intensified. She spent hours studying astrology charts, practicing her psychic readings, and honing her skills. She had recently purchased a new set of tarot cards from Mystic Moon Magic Shop, a popular metaphysical store in nearby Starkville. The cards were said to be enchanted, enhancing the accuracy of her readings. On the cold winter evening of January 23, 2008, the small town of Eupora, Mississippi was cloaked in an eerie stillness. The air hung heavy with a sense of foreboding, as if nature itself held its breath in anticipation of the tragic events that were about to unfold. As twilight descended upon the town, casting long shadows across the landscape, the lifeless body of 29-year-old Katia Powell was discovered beneath the majestic Magnolia tree that adorned her backyard. The grim discovery was made by Patty Delgado, a close friend and neighbor of the deceased psychic and astrologer. Patty, who had grown concerned after not hearing from Katia for several days, ventured over to her house to check on her well-being. What Patty encountered was a scene straight out of a nightmare. The lifeless body of her dear friend lay sprawled on the ground, bathed in the pale moonlight. Shock and horror washed over Patty as she frantically dialed emergency services, her trembling voice betraying her disbelief at the sight before her. Within minutes, the Upora Police Department descended upon the scene, their flashing blue lights illuminating the otherwise dark and somber neighborhood. Officers cordoned off the area, preventing curious onlookers from getting too close. The news of Kadia's untimely demise spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community, leaving its residents in a state of shock and disbelief. Local media outlets, such as the Upora Gazette and the Mississippi Times, dedicated coverage to the perplexing case. The story captured the attention of the nation, with news outlets like CNN and Fox News picking up the story, eager to delve into the enigma surrounding Kadia's demise. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation took numerous twists and turns, leading detectives down a labyrinth of clues and potential suspects. The once peaceful streets of Upora became a hotbed of speculation and intrigue, as residents grappled with the unsettling knowledge that a killer could be lurking among them. As news of Kadia Powell's tragic death spread throughout the town of Upora, the community was left in shock and disbelief. The small Mississippi town, known for its close-knit residents and peaceful atmosphere, had never experienced such a heinous crime. The murder of a beloved psychic and astrologer sent shockwaves through the community, leaving everyone searching for answers. The investigation into Kadia's death was swiftly taken over by the local police department, with detectives Felicia Wallister and Sherry Backram leading the charge. These seasoned investigators were no strangers to solving crimes, having successfully closed numerous cases in the past. Their dedication and commitment to justice were evident from the moment they arrived at the crime scene. The detectives meticulously combed through every inch of the area surrounding the Magnolia tree where Kadia's lifeless body was found. They carefully collected any potential evidence, taking note of even the smallest detail. Every leaf, every blade of grass, and every footprint was analyzed, as the detectives left no stone unturned in their quest for the truth. As the investigation unfolded, the detectives discovered several key pieces of evidence that would prove crucial in piecing together the events leading up to Kadia's death. They found a series of text messages on her phone, indicating a possible conflict with an unidentified individual. The detectives traced the number, leading them to a person of interest who lived in a neighboring town. The detectives also interviewed friends and family members, hoping to gain insight into Kadia's personal life and potential motives for her murder. They discovered that she had recently been featured in a local newspaper article, highlighting her unique abilities as a psychic and astrologer. The article had garnered attention from both supporters and skeptics alike, leading to a heated debate within the community. Additionally, the detectives uncovered a diary belonging to Kadia, in which she detailed her aspirations and fears. The entries revealed her desire to expand her psychic abilities and her struggle to gain acceptance from her father, Reverend Vance Powell. These personal insights shed light on the complexities of Kadia's life and provided the detectives with a deeper understanding of the victim. As the investigation continued, the detectives faced numerous challenges and setbacks. They encountered false leads, unreliable witnesses, and a lack of concrete evidence. However, their unwavering determination and commitment to justice kept them focused on their ultimate goal, finding Kadia's killer and bringing them to justice. Reverend Vance Vice Powell, a Baptist minister in the neighboring town of Mathiston, found himself at the center of a chilling murder investigation. The prime suspect in the tragic death of his daughter, Kadia Powell, Reverend Powell's strong religious convictions and disapproval of her psychic and astrological work raised eyebrows among the investigators. As the police interrogated Reverend Powell, they sought to uncover any potential motives he might have had for committing such a heinous crime. The suspect's response was a mix of anger and denial, vehemently proclaiming his innocence. However, the investigators knew they had to dig deeper into his background to uncover the truth. Reverend Powell's opposition to his daughter's involvement in the psychic world was well known in the tight-knit community. He believed that her work was influenced by evil forces and would lead her down a path to damnation. This belief put him at odds with Kadia and caused tension within their relationship. The investigators delved into Reverend Powell's past, searching for any evidence that could link him to the crime. They discovered that he had a reputation for being a strict and controlling father, often clashing with Kadia over her choices in life. The tension between them had escalated in the months leading up to her death, as Kadia had expressed her desire to expand her psychic abilities. To further complicate matters, Reverend Powell's sermons at the Mathiston Baptist Church had become increasingly fiery and passionate in the weeks preceding the murder. He had been warning his congregation about the dangers of the occult and the influence of demons in people's lives. Some members of the community wondered if his sermons were a veiled confession of guilt. As the investigation continued, the detectives meticulously combed through Reverend Powell's phone records, financial transactions, and personal belongings. They interviewed friends, family, and members of the congregation to gather more information about his character and potential motives. The investigators knew that they had a challenging task ahead of them. They had to separate fact from speculation and build a solid case against Reverend Powell if they were to bring justice for Kadia's tragic death. The truth, they believed, was hidden somewhere within the web of secrets and emotions that surrounded this small Mississippi town. As the investigation into the murder of Kadia Powell unfolded, a shocking revelation came to light. Another life had been cut short in the small town of Eupora, Mississippi. The victim, Syria Denham, a 25-year-old cashier at the local Dollar General, was found dead in her own home. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, deepening the sense of fear and unease that had already taken hold. Syria's body had been hidden in the refrigerator, a chilling detail that added to the macabre nature of the crime. The police determined that she had been killed a few days prior to Kadia's tragic death. The timing and proximity of these two murders raised suspicion and intensified the urgency of the investigation. The focus quickly turned to Lancelot Hamilton, Syria's boyfriend and an ex-felon. Eyewitnesses had spotted his distinctive pickup truck near Kadia's house on the day of her murder. This crucial piece of information made Lancelot a person of interest in both cases. To further complicate matters, Lancelot's criminal history added a layer of complexity to the case. The investigators meticulously reviewed his past convictions, searching for any connection to the murders. They reached out to law enforcement agencies in neighboring towns, collaborating and sharing information to build a comprehensive profile of Lancelot. As the investigation unfolded, the media interest surrounding the case grew. Local newspapers covered the story. The tight-knit community found itself thrust into the spotlight, grappling with the weight of these heinous crimes. The investigators faced mounting pressure to solve the murders and bring the perpetrators to justice. Every lead was pursued with unwavering determination as they sifted through evidence, interviewed witnesses, and analyzed forensic findings. The clock ticked, and the town anxiously awaited answers. In their relentless pursuit of justice, the police made a breakthrough discovery a few weeks after the initial investigation. On a cold winter day in late January of 2008, they uncovered a hidden diary belonging to Syria Denham, the 25-year-old cashier at the local Dollar General who was found dead in her own home. The diary provided a glimpse into the tumultuous relationship between Syria and her boyfriend, Lancelot Hamilton, an ex-felon who quickly became a person of interest in the case. The diary entries painted a disturbing picture of a relationship marred by domestic disputes and violence. Syria detailed instances of physical abuse and emotional manipulation, shedding light on the possible motives behind her tragic death. The pages were filled with her fears and desperation as she struggled to break free from the toxic cycle of her relationship with Lancelot. The police meticulously analyzed the diary, documenting every detail and potential clue. The entries revealed that Syria had confided in a close friend, expressing her desire to leave Lancelot and seek help. The investigators immediately reached out to this friend, hoping to gather more information that could aid in their quest for justice. As the investigation unfolded, the police uncovered additional evidence linking Lancelot to the murder of Kadia Powell, the 29-year-old psychic and astrologer whose lifeless body was found under the Magnolia tree in her own backyard. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station captured Lancelot's pickup truck near Kadia's house on the day of the murder, providing a crucial piece of the puzzle. With the newfound knowledge from Syria's diary and the surveillance footage, the investigators were determined to connect the dots and bring the truth to light. They delved deeper into Lancelot's background, uncovering a history of violent behavior and a criminal record that further fueled their suspicions. As the investigation reached its critical juncture, the police were closing in on their suspects. The truth behind the deaths of Kadia Powell and Syria Denham was within reach, and the town held its breath in anticipation of justice being served. Lancelot Hamilton, the primary person of interest in the murder investigation, faced intense scrutiny from the police. With his troubled past and association with the late Syria Denham, suspicions surrounding his involvement in the murders grew stronger. The investigators delved deep into Lancelot's personality, dreams, and possible motives, leaving no stone unturned in their quest for the truth. During the interrogation, Lancelot's demeanor betrayed a mixture of anger and fear. as he struggled to maintain his composure under the mounting evidence against him. The investigators skillfully probed into his background, meticulously dissecting his every move in the days leading up to the murders. As the questioning intensified, Lancelot's facade began to crumble. His attempts to evade the investigators' inquiries became increasingly futile as the weight of the evidence bore down on him. The police presented him with compelling evidence, including eyewitness accounts placing his pickup truck near Claudia Powell's house on the day of her murder. These accounts were further bolstered by surveillance footage from a nearby gas station, capturing Lancelot's vehicle at the scene. In addition to the circumstantial evidence, the investigators uncovered a disturbing connection between Lancelot and Syria. The recently discovered diary of Syria Denham revealed a tumultuous relationship marred by domestic disputes and violence. This revelation painted a chilling picture of a troubled dynamic between the couple, raising further suspicions about Lancelot's potential involvement in both murders. The police, driven by an unwavering commitment to justice, continued to dig deeper into Lancelot's background. They reached out to acquaintances, friends, and family members, seeking any information that could shed light on his motives. The investigators meticulously combed through phone records, financial transactions, and social media profiles, piecing together a comprehensive timeline of Lancelot's activities in the days leading up to the murders. As the investigation unfolded, the media's attention turned towards this gripping case that had captivated the small town of Upora. Local newspapers ran updates on the investigation, while television news stations dedicated segments to the latest developments. The community, gripped by fear and curiosity, anxiously awaited the resolution of this haunting mystery. With Lancelot Hamilton at the center of the investigation, the police were determined to bring justice to the victims and closure to the community. As the case approached its climax, the truth remained just out of reach, tantalizingly close yet frustratingly elusive. After an intense investigation, the truth behind the murders that shook the small town of Upora finally came to light, revealing Lancelot Hamilton as the cold-blooded killer. Lancelot, a troubled ex-felon, had committed the heinous crimes out of fear that his dark secret would be exposed. The police meticulously unraveled the intricate web of deception, leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice. The motive for the first murder, that of Syria Denham, a 25-year-old cashier at the local Dollar General, was rooted in a tumultuous relationship marred by domestic disputes and violence. Lancelot's fear of Syria's ghost haunting him did not stop him from committing the unthinkable act of taking her life. Little did he know that this act would set off a chain of events that would ultimately lead to his own downfall. The discovery of Syria's hidden diary proved to be a crucial turning point in the investigation. The diary detailed the troubled relationship between Syria and Lancelot, providing valuable insights into their lives and the events that transpired leading up to her tragic death. This newfound knowledge allowed the investigators to connect the dots and follow the trail of evidence. As the investigation progressed, the police uncovered a chilling connection between Syria's murder and the death of Claudia Powell, the 29-year-old psychic and astrologer. Lancelot's fear of Syria's ghost exposing his dark secret to Claudia had driven him to silence her forever. The police painstakingly pieced together the timeline of events, meticulously analyzing phone records, surveillance footage, and witness testimonies to build their case against Lancelot. On the day of the arrest, the atmosphere in Upora was heavy with anticipation. The entire community was on edge, eager for justice to be served. The police, armed with overwhelming evidence, closed in on Lancelot. The arrest took place on a cold winter morning, the same chilling backdrop that had witnessed the crimes committed. As the handcuffs clicked shut, a collective sigh of relief swept through the town. The arrest of Lancelot Hamilton sent shockwaves through the community, leaving Claudia's family devastated and the townspeople grappling with the horrifying reality that such evil could exist in their midst. The media frenzy that followed was unprecedented, with news outlets from across the state covering the shocking details of the case. The story of murder under the Magnolia trees became a cautionary tale, a reminder that darkness can lurk even in the most seemingly idyllic places. The trial that ensued was a solemn affair, filled with heightened emotions and a sense of justice hanging in the balance. District Attorney Warren Prancett, a seasoned prosecutor known for his unwavering dedication to upholding the law, presented a compelling case against Lancelot Hamilton. Prancett meticulously outlined the chilling details of the murders, painting a vivid picture of the heinous crimes committed in the small town of Upora, Mississippi. In the courtroom, the victim's family sat with a mixture of grief and anticipation as they watched the proceedings unfold. The defense attorney, David Joe Lodies, a renowned legal expert known for his tenacity, fought fiercely to cast doubt on the evidence presented by the prosecution. Lodies argued that the police had rushed to judgment and that there were other plausible suspects that had not been thoroughly investigated. Throughout the trial, the courtroom was filled with tension as witnesses were called to the stand. Friends and acquaintances of both victims bravely took the stand, recounting their interactions with Lancelot Hamilton and the victims in the months leading up to their deaths. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, including phone records, DNA analysis, and eyewitness testimonies, all pointing towards Hamilton's guilt. As the trial progressed, the media frenzy surrounding the case reached a fever pitch. News outlets from across Mississippi descended upon Eupora, eager to report on the sensational trial. Journalists from jostled for prime spots in the overcrowded courtroom, their pens poised to capture every detail of the proceedings. After weeks of intense courtroom drama, the jury finally reached a verdict. The courtroom fell into a hushed silence as the foreperson stood up to deliver the verdict. Guilty. The word reverberated through the room, causing gasps and tears to flow from the victims' families. The weight of the guilty verdict was palpable, offering a sense of closure to those who had lost their loved ones so tragically. Lancelot Hamilton, now convicted of both murders, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing brought a mix of relief and sorrow to the victims' families as they grappled with the finality of the court's decision. Some found solace in the fact that justice had been served, while others still struggled to come to terms with the loss they had endured. The impact of the trial extended far beyond the courtroom walls, leaving an indelible mark on the community of Eupora. The townsfolk, once united in their grief, now faced the difficult task of healing and moving forward. After the conclusion of the trial, the individuals involved in the murder under the Magnolia trees case embarked on their own journeys of healing and moving forward. Reverend Vance Vice Powell, Kadia's father, grappled with the guilt and remorse of his strained relationship with his daughter. He sought solace in his faith, finding comfort in the support of his congregation and the prayers of the community. Reverend Powell dedicated himself to spreading a message of love and forgiveness, hoping to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Meanwhile, the police investigators, Detectives Felicia Wallister and Sherry Backram, continued their tireless pursuit of justice in other cases. They remain committed to protecting the community, tirelessly working to solve crimes and bring closure to victims and their families. Their dedication and meticulous approach earned them accolades from their colleagues and the respect of the community. Kadia's family and friends found solace in each other, supporting one another through the difficult process of grieving and healing. They held a memorial service to honor Kadia's memory, inviting friends, family, and community members to celebrate her life. The service was a somber yet uplifting event, filled with heartfelt speeches, music, and shared memories. The community came together, offering their condolences and support to Kadia's loved ones. In the wider community of Eupora, Mississippi, the impact of the case was profound. The tragic events had shaken the town to its core, leaving a lasting imprint on its residents. The local newspaper, the Eupora Times, dedicated several articles to the case, documenting the investigation, trial, and the aftermath. The case also garnered attention from regional news outlets, with television stations like WDVA and WAPT covering the trial proceedings. As the town slowly began to heal, the community rallied together, organizing events and initiatives to promote healing and unity. Local businesses, such as the Magnolia Diner and the Eupora Flower Shop, offered their services in support to the victims' families. The tragedy had brought the community closer, fostering a sense of resilience and solidarity. In the years that followed, Eupora, Mississippi, continued to rebuild and move forward. The murder under the Magnolia trees case served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing our loved ones. The town learned valuable lessons about the power of community, compassion, and the pursuit of justice. The memory of Kadia and Syria remained alive in the hearts of those who knew them, and their legacy served as a reminder to embrace life and support one another. The murder under the Magnolia trees case remains etched in the annals of Eupora's history, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human darkness. It serves as a testament to the tireless efforts of law enforcement, the resilience of the victims' loved ones, and the enduring power of justice. In the heart of Oklahoma City, Joanna Rangel, 56, lived a life that seemed like it came straight out of a movie. As the heir to a vast oil and gas fortune, Joanna was a well-known figure in the city's high society. With a history of attending prestigious schools, she was not only wealthy but also well-educated and respected. Joanna was married to Frank H. Rangel, a powerful state senator, making them one of the most influential couples in Oklahoma. They had children who looked up to their mother as a role model. Joanna's personality was as bright as the Oklahoma sun. She was known for her kindness, her love for her family, and her passion for the ranch life that was part of her family's heritage. Apart from managing her family's estate, she was deeply involved in charity work, always looking to give back to her community. In the days leading up to her untimely death in January 2000, Joanna was full of dreams and plans. With the new millennium, the world buzzed with excitement and people everywhere were talking about the Y2K bug scare that turned out to be a false alarm. Amidst this, Joanna was planning to rejuvenate her appearance with a facelift. She hoped this would help her step confidently into the new decade, continuing her public and private duties with renewed vigor. Little did anyone know, this decision would lead to a tragic turn of events that would shock the community and leave a lasting impact on her family and friends. On the morning of January 15, 2000, Oklahoma City was draped in a blanket of gray clouds, setting a somber mood across the town. It was on this chilly winter day that the unexpected tragedy of Joanna Rangel unfolded within the sterile walls of a renowned private clinic, a place where the elite of Oklahoma City often turned to in pursuit of perfection. Joanna, a prominent figure in the city's social circles, had scheduled a facelift surgery, aiming to start the new millennium with renewed confidence. However, what was supposed to be a routine procedure turned fatal. Joanna's life came to an abrupt end on the operating table, leaving behind a wave of disbelief and sorrow. The grim discovery was made by the surgical team itself, led by Dr. Jonathan Humberston, the clinic's top surgeon. The atmosphere in the operating room shifted from professional calm to chaotic distress as the team realized Joanna could not be revived. Among them was Angie Ruth Niles, a young nurse who found herself in a situation no medical professional ever hopes to face. Despite their extensive training, nothing could have prepared them for the shock and immediate grief of losing a patient in such circumstances. Word of Joanna's death quickly spread beyond the clinic's walls, casting a shadow over the city. The community, still buzzing from the recent New Year's celebrations and the global sigh of relief that the Y2K bug had been a non-event, was now mourning the loss of one of its most beloved figures. Joanna's death, occurring in a place where she sought to enhance her beauty, added a tragic irony to her passing and left the city in search of answers. Shortly after the tragic news of Joanna Rangel's death during surgery broke out on that overcast January morning in 2000, Oklahoma City police swiftly arrived at the private clinic. The clinic, known for its exclusive clientele and top-notch services, had suddenly become the center of a grim investigation. Leading the investigation were Detective Mickey Larson and his partner, Detective Sarah Gumbert. Both were experienced officers, but the nature of this case was unlike any they had encountered before. The crime scene was not what they typically faced. There were no signs of a struggle or violence. Instead, they stepped into a high-tech operating room, where the only evidence of something gone wrong was the medical equipment and the lifeless body of Joanna Rangel. Detective Larson, known for his methodical approach, immediately began documenting the scene, taking notes on everything from the arrangement of surgical tools to the settings on the medical monitors. Detective Gumbert, on the other hand, focused on interviewing the shocked staff, trying to piece together the timeline of events. Their objective was clear: to understand how a routine cosmetic surgery could turn fatal. The police collected various items for analysis, including syringes, vials of medication, and the records of the anesthesia machine. Every piece of evidence was handled with care, knowing that any could hold the key to unraveling the mystery of Joanna's death. As news vans from local stations like K4 and KWEV crowded the clinic's parking lot, the police continued their meticulous work inside. The investigation into Joanna Rangel's death promised to be a high-profile case, with every detail scrutinized by both the authorities and the public. In the wake of Joanna Rangel's unexpected death, the focus of the Oklahoma City police investigation quickly turned to Dr. Jonathan Humberston, age 48. As the surgeon who performed Joanna's facelift, Dr. Humberston was at the center of the tragic event. Known as Oklahoma City's premier plastic surgeon, he was a familiar face in the same high society circles as Joanna. However, rumors had been swirling about his struggles with alcohol, casting a shadow over his professional reputation. Dr. Humberston's background was impressive. He had attended some of the most prestigious medical schools in the country and had built a successful practice in Oklahoma City. His dreams were as big as his achievements. He aspired to be recognized as one of the best plastic surgeons nationwide. But beneath the surface of his professional success, there were whispers about the pressure he faced and how it might have led him to seek solace in alcohol. When detectives Larson and Gumbert sat down with Dr. Humberston for questioning, they encountered a man who was both defensive and visibly stressed. He insisted that Joanna's surgery was routine and that he had performed similar procedures countless times without issue. Yet, his demeanor fluctuated wildly during the interrogation, swinging from anger to moments of profound silence, as if he was grappling with the weight of the situation. The police were keen to understand every detail of the surgery, from the preparation to the moment things took a tragic turn. They questioned Dr. Humberston about his actions and decisions in the operating room, looking for any signs of negligence or malpractice. The interrogation was thorough, leaving no stone unturned, as the detectives aimed to piece together how a procedure meant to bring joy ended in sorrow. As the investigation continued, the story of Joanna Rangel's death began to capture the attention of the entire city. Local newspapers and TV stations were filled with updates and speculations about the case. This tragedy had struck a chord, reminding everyone of the fragility of life. As the investigation into Joanna Rangel's death unfolded, the spotlight shifted to Frank H. Rangel, Joanna's husband, who was 59 years old. Frank was a state senator, well-known and respected in government circles. His marriage to Joanna had united two powerful families, making them a prominent couple in Oklahoma City. Despite his influential position, rumors of financial difficulties and a secret affair began to surface, adding complexity to the case. Frank Rangel was a man of ambition, dreaming of leaving a lasting legacy in Oklahoma politics. However, his personal life was not as straightforward as his public persona suggested. The police were curious about any motives Frank might have had, considering the whispers about his extramarital relationship and potential financial gains from Joanna's untimely death. When detectives Larson and Gumbert interviewed Frank, they encountered a man who projected calm and grief over the loss of his wife. He spoke of Joanna with respect and affection, denying any involvement in her death. Frank's demeanor during the interrogation was composed, even as the detectives probed into sensitive areas of his personal and financial life. He insisted that his marriage, despite any rumors, was strong and that he had no reason to wish harm upon Joanna. The detectives were meticulous in their questioning, aware that the dynamics of the Rangel family could hold clues to the mystery. They examined Frank's alibi, financial records, and his interactions with Joanna leading up to the surgery. The investigation was thorough, leaving no aspect of Frank's life unexplored. The case garnered media attention, and the intrigue of a high-profile investigation, combined with the drama of personal and political scandals, captivated the city. In a time when the world was celebrating the start of a new millennium, the tragic death of Joanna Rangel added a somber note to the year's beginning. On a brisk January afternoon, a week after the tragic death of Joanna Rangel, Oklahoma City police made a significant breakthrough in the case. New evidence emerged that would pivot the direction of their investigation. During a meticulous review of the clinic's security footage, detectives spotted something alarming. Angie Ruth Niles, a young nurse who was part of the surgical team, was captured on camera tampering with medical supplies the night before Joanna's procedure. The weather outside mirrored the chill of the revelation as a cold front had swept through Oklahoma City, leaving streets slick with ice. Inside the warm confines of the police station, detectives Larson and Gumbert watched the footage repeatedly, their seasoned eyes catching the subtle but deliberate actions of Angie. This discovery raised a multitude of questions about her involvement and motives. Armed with this new evidence, the detectives wasted no time. They revisited the clinic, this time focusing on gathering any physical proof that could link the tampered supplies to Joanna's surgery. They collected vials, syringes, and any medications that could have been compromised, ensuring each item was meticulously cataloged for forensic analysis. The police's response to this breakthrough was swift. They knew that this piece of evidence could be the key to unraveling the mystery of Joanna's death. The community, still reeling from the shock of losing one of its most beloved figures, followed the developments closely. Local news outlets were quick to report on the police's findings, adding another layer of intrigue to the high-profile case. In a city that had just celebrated the dawn of the new millennium with optimism and joy, the turn of events in Joanna Rangel's case served as a stark reminder of the unpredictability of life. As the investigation continued, the police were determined to piece together the puzzle, driven by the evidence that had unexpectedly come to light. With the investigation taking a dramatic turn, the focus shifted to Angie Ruth Niles, a 23-year-old nurse at the clinic and a new, critical suspect in Joanna Rangel's death. Angie, who had been captured on the clinic's security footage tampering with medical supplies, suddenly found herself at the center of the police's attention. Known as Frank Rangel's mistress and a key figure in the clinic, Angie's involvement painted a complex picture of personal and professional entanglements. Angie had dreams of moving up in the world, seeing her relationship with Frank as a ticket out of her current life. Her aspirations, however, were now overshadowed by the serious allegations against her. When detectives Larson and Gumbert brought Angie in for questioning, they encountered a young woman whose demeanor oscillated between nervousness and defiance. Her initial calmness gave way to moments of anger as the interrogation intensified, revealing the pressure she was under. The detectives probed Angie about her actions on the night before the surgery, her relationship with Frank, and her presence during the fatal procedure. They were keen to understand her motives, questioning whether jealousy, ambition, or coercion played a role in her actions. Angie's responses were evasive at first, but as the evidence mounted, the facade began to crack, suggesting that there was more to her involvement than initially appeared. As the news of Angie's interrogation spread, the community was abuzz with speculation. Local media, including stations like KWTV and the Oklahoma Gazette, closely followed the developments, providing updates that kept the city on edge. In a time when Oklahoma City was still basking in the optimism of the new millennium, the case of Joanna Rangel introduced a narrative filled with intrigue and betrayal, capturing the attention of a community grappling with the unfolding drama. The investigation into Angie Ruth Niles added a new layer of complexity to the case, as detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading to Joanna's tragic death. With each new revelation, the city watched, waiting for justice to be served in a case that had touched the hearts of many. As the investigation into Joanna Rangel's tragic death deepened, all clues began pointing towards Angie Ruth Niles, the 23-year-old nurse and the mistress of Frank Rangel. The evidence, particularly the security footage of Angie tampering with the medical supplies, was damning. It became clear that Angie, driven by a mix of personal ambition and influence from Frank, played a pivotal role in the events leading to Joanna's death. Angie's dreams of a future with Frank, away from the shadows of his marriage to Joanna, had morphed into a sinister plot. Under the guise of a routine facelift procedure, Angie manipulated the medical supplies, leading to fatal complications during Joanna's surgery. The police, after gathering all necessary evidence and corroborating the sequence of events, moved to make the arrest. On a cold morning in late January, just as the city was beginning to move past the Y2K frenzy and the excitement of the new millennium, Oklahoma City police arrived at Angie's residence. The arrest was swift, capturing Angie by surprise. She had been planning to flee the country with Frank, with tickets booked for a flight to Colombia. However, the police intercepted before their connecting flight to DFW Airport, preventing their escape. Angie's reaction to her arrest was a mix of disbelief and resignation. She had underestimated the extent of the investigation and the evidence against her. Frank, on the other hand, remained silent, his political career and personal life in ruins. The news of the arrest sent shockwaves through Oklahoma City. Local media, including the Oklahoman and News 9, were quick to cover the story, with reporters stationed outside the courthouse and the police station, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. The community, still reeling from the loss of Joanna, found some solace in the swift action of the police. Joanna's family, devastated by her loss, expressed a cautious relief at the arrests, hopeful for justice in the wake of their unimaginable grief. The trial of Angie Ruth Niles, the nurse implicated in the tragic death of Joanna Rangel, became a focal point for Oklahoma City. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the city watched with bated breath, eager for justice in a case that had gripped the community's heart. The prosecution, led by the determined Amy and Clark, a seasoned attorney known for her tough stance on crime, presented a compelling case against Angie. They outlined how her actions, influenced by her relationship with Frank Rangel, directly led to Joanna's untimely death. On the defense side, John J. Mercian, a skilled lawyer with a reputation for handling high-profile cases, argued for leniency. He painted Angie as a young woman caught in a web of manipulation, her judgment clouded by love and ambition. Despite his efforts, the evidence against Angie was overwhelming, leaving little room for doubt about her involvement. The trial was the talk of the town, with daily updates dominating the news. Stations like Coco 5 in the Oklahoman provided extensive coverage, capturing the emotional testimonies in the tense atmosphere in the courtroom. Joanna's family, present throughout the proceedings, displayed a mix of sorrow and hope, clinging to the belief that justice would be served. When the verdict was finally announced, Angie was found guilty, a decision that sent a wave of relief through the courtroom and beyond. She was sentenced to life in prison, a punishment that Joanna's family felt was just, yet they knew no sentence could fill the void left by Joanna's death. The community, while satisfied with the outcome, reflected on the tragedy, pondering the fragile nature of life and the consequences of our choices. The verdict and sentencing closed a chapter on a case that had captivated Oklahoma City, leaving a lasting impact on all involved. As the news of the sentencing spread, discussions about the case continued, with many hoping it would serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of envy and deceit. In the months following the trial and sentencing of Angie Ruth Niles for the tragic death of Joanna Rangel, Oklahoma City began to heal. The high-profile case that had once dominated conversations at every corner of the city slowly receded into the background, leaving behind a community forever changed by the events. Detectives Mickey Larson and Sarah Gumbert, the officers who had tirelessly worked to bring justice to Joanna, continued their service with the Oklahoma City Police Department. The case had left an indelible mark on their careers, reinforcing their commitment to upholding the law and serving their community. They often found themselves reflecting on the complexities of human nature they had witnessed during the investigation. For Joanna's family, life without her was a difficult adjustment. They channeled their grief into continuing her legacy, dedicating themselves to the charitable causes she had been passionate about. The ranch, a place Joanna loved dearly, became a sanctuary for the family, a place where they could feel close to her spirit and keep her memory alive. Angie Ruth Niles, now serving a life sentence, faced the consequences of her actions. The reality of her situation set in as she adjusted to life behind bars, a stark contrast to the future she had once envisioned with Frank Rangel. Frank, whose involvement in the case had shattered his career and personal life, struggled to come to terms with the fallout. His dreams of political legacy and influence were irreparably damaged. The community of Oklahoma City, while moving forward, would not forget the tragedy that had unfolded among them. Local media outlets, including the Oklahoman and K4TV, occasionally revisited the case, reminding residents of the importance of justice and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As life continued in the aftermath of the trial, those touched by the case found ways to move on, each carrying their own lessons and memories of a case that had captivated a city and tested the bonds of its community. The tragic case of Joanna Rangel serves as a somber reminder of the lengths to which individuals will go to reshape their destinies, often with devastating consequences. Jenny Braze was a 34-year-old woman who lived in Palm Bay, Florida, with her husband, Arthur. She was a teacher of the local high school, where she was loved by her students and fellow teachers. Jenny had a bachelor's degree in English literature from the University of Florida. She was passionate about reading and always found time to help others improve their reading skills. Jenny was especially known for organizing book clubs and poetry readings in the community. She loved books like To Kill a Mockingbird and Pride and Prejudice and often recommended them to her friends and students. Jenny was also very athletic. She loved running and participated in local marathons. She was often seen jogging in the mornings around Palm Bay's Turkey Creek Sanctuary. She had even completed the Disney World Marathon twice and was training for another marathon when she died. Her love for running kept her fit and healthy, and she encouraged others to join her in her fitness journey. Jenny's family included her husband, Arthur Braze, her parents, Thomas and Karen Mason, from Iowa, and her younger sister, Emily. She was close to her family and often spent weekends with them, having picnics at the local parks or attending church services. Her friends described her as kind-hearted and always willing to lend a helping hand. Jenny was known for her warm smile and friendly nature. She had a way of making everyone feel special and important. In the days before her death, Jenny was busy with her usual activities. She was planning the next book club meeting and was excited about discussing the latest book they had chosen. Her Nights Under the Maid's Moon by the late Joyce Lehman, which was a popular read in 2004. She was also looking forward to participating in the upcoming Palm Bay Fun Run, a local charity event. Jenny had just bought new running shoes from the nearby Sports Authority and was eager to try them out. Jenny's life seemed perfect on the outside, but she had secrets that not many knew about. Jenny dreamed of writing her own book one day and often talked about it with her friends. She wanted to share her love for literature and hoped her book would inspire others. Unfortunately, Jenny's life was cut short before she could fulfill her dreams. On February 18, 2004, Palm Bay, Florida, was covered in a light fog, and the temperature was cool and comfortable. At around 7:30 a.m., Carol Stevens, a 92-year-old retiree and neighbor of Jenny Braze, was walking her dog, Melania Stratanowicz, in Turkey Creek Sanctuary, a popular local park. Carol enjoyed her morning walks and always listened to her favorite radio station, 104.1 FM, which was playing some Backstreet Boys that morning. As Carol walked along the path, she noticed something unusual near a cluster of trees. Melania began to bark and pull on his leash, leading Carol closer to the area. As she got closer, she saw what looked like a person lying on the ground. Her heart raced as she approached the figure and realized it was Jenny Braze. Jenny was lying on her back, her eyes blown out by gunshots, blood surrounding her head. Carol was in shock. She quickly took out her cell phone, a Nokia 3310, and dialed 911, her hands trembling. The operator instructed her to stay on the line and wait for the police and paramedics to arrive. Carol kept glancing at Jenny, unable to believe what she was seeing. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air as the police and paramedics arrived. Officers quickly secured the area, and paramedics confirmed that Jenny was dead. They noticed 2 gunshot wounds, 1 in each eye, and a message written in blood beside her, "I am a cheater." The scene was both shocking and heartbreaking. As the police worked, news of the murder quickly spread through the neighborhood. Local TV stations like LES2 News and WKNG News 6 began covering the story, and reporters gathered near the park, eager for any information they could get. The discovery of Jenny Braze's body shocked the quiet community of Palm Bay. People who knew Jenny were devastated, unable to comprehend how such a kind and beloved person could meet such a violent end. The police vowed to bring her killer to justice, but the journey to uncover the truth was just beginning. The Palm Bay police arrived swiftly at the scene where Jenny Braze's body was found. It was a foggy morning on February 18, 2004, and the atmosphere was tense. Detectives Carol Harrison and Brielle Honley led the investigation. Detective Harrison, a tall man with graying hair, was known for his sharp attention to detail and calm demeanor. Detective Honley, a younger officer with a knack for empathy, was determined and methodical. The crime scene was disturbing. Jenny's body lay on the damp ground of Turkey Creek Sanctuary, a local park. Blood surrounded her head, and the chilling message, "I am a cheater," was written in her blood next to her. She had been shot twice, once in each eye. At such a close range, her eye sockets were blown out, making the scene even more horrifying. As the detectives began their work, the park was quickly cordoned off with yellow police tape. Forensic experts arrived with their equipment, setting up tents and floodlights to illuminate the area. They carefully photographed the scene, ensuring they captured every detail. They collected bullet casings and took samples of the blood message for analysis. The detectives looked for any other clues around the body. They noticed the ground was slightly disturbed, suggesting a struggle. Detective Harrison pointed out a broken branch nearby, which could have been used in the fight. The early morning light added a sense of urgency to their work. They knew time was critical in the early stages of an investigation. The detectives used luminol to check for any blood that might have been cleaned up. They also used metal detectors to search for any hidden evidence. As they worked, they interviewed nearby residents and park visitors who might have seen or heard anything unusual. The autopsy later confirmed that Jenny was shot with a 9mm handgun. The police knew they had to find this weapon to make their case stronger. They also checked security cameras in the area, hoping to catch any suspicious activity. Carol, still shaken, gave a brief statement to the police about how she found Jenny's body. She was visibly upset, her voice quivering as she recounted the morning's events. After her statement, Carol went home, hugging Melania tightly, grateful for his presence but deeply disturbed by what she had witnessed. Detectives Harrison and Homley worked long hours, piecing together the evidence. They were determined to find out who could commit such a brutal crime against someone so beloved in their community. Every detail mattered, and they couldn't afford to miss anything. The investigation was just beginning, and the detectives knew they had a long road ahead. The community of Palm Bay held its breath, waiting for answers and hoping for justice for Jenny Braze. Arthur Braze, Jenny's husband, was the first suspect the police investigated. Arthur was 36 years old and worked at a local pet supply store. He was known to be methodical and logical, with a passion for solving complex problems. His interest in amateur pharmacology, a hobby where he experimented with different chemicals, made the police suspicious. Detectives Carol Harrison and Brielle Homely brought Arthur in for questioning on the evening of February 19, 2004. The interrogation room was quiet and dimly lit, adding to the tension. Arthur appeared calm, but was visibly tired and stressed. He claimed he had been working late on the night of the murder, trying to complete an inventory at the store. Arthur described his marriage to Jenny as generally happy, but admitted they had their struggles. He said he had no idea who could have wanted to harm her. When the detectives asked about Jenny's affairs, Arthur's calm demeanor shifted. He seemed shocked and hurt, insisting he did not know anything about her extramarital relationships. Detectives pressed Arthur on his whereabouts during the critical hours of the murder. Arthur provided an alibi, stating he was at work until 10 p.m. and then went straight home. However, there were no witnesses to confirm his story. His colleagues had left earlier, and there were no security cameras at the store to verify his claims. Arthur's methodical nature came into question. The detectives knew he had a deep understanding of chemistry from his hobby. They wondered if he could have used this knowledge in the murder. However, Arthur maintained his innocence, growing more frustrated with each question. Forensic evidence began to mount against him. The bullets used in the murder were traced back to a 9mm handgun registered in Arthur's name. When asked about the gun, Arthur said it had been stolen from his home months before, but he had not reported it missing. This admission only increased the detective's suspicions. Throughout the interrogation, Arthur's responses were a mix of calm explanations and visible frustration. He repeatedly denied any involvement in Jenny's murder, but the detectives felt there was more to the story. They knew they needed more evidence to either confirm his guilt or clear his name. As the investigation continued, Arthur remained a prime suspect. The community of Palm Bay watched closely, waiting to see if the quiet, logical husband could really be behind such a brutal crime. The detectives were determined to uncover the truth, knowing that every detail could bring them closer to solving the case. Judy Ann Wharton, Jenny Braze's close friend, was the second suspect the police investigated. Judy Ann, 32, was a metaphysical surgeon and spiritual healer from Los Angeles, something her deeply conservative community found deeply suspicious. She was known for her vibrant and outgoing personality. Always the life of the party, Judy Ann often brought homemade health drinks and snacks to Jenny's home. She believed in holistic living and frequently talked about the benefits of natural remedies. On February 20, 2004, detectives Carol Harrison and Brielle Homely called Judy Ann in for questioning. She arrived dressed in bright, flowing clothes, with a calm and serene demeanor. The detectives asked her about her relationship with Jenny, and Judy Ann admitted they were very close friends. She also confessed that they had a sexual relationship, but insisted it was consensual and loving. Judy Ann's alibi for the night of the murder was that she was hosting a spiritual healing session at her home, attended by several people. She provided the names of the attendees, who later confirmed her story. However, the detectives were still suspicious due to her close relationship with Jenny and access to her home. When questioned about the murder, Judy Ann seemed genuinely shocked and saddened. She described Jenny as a kind and loving person who would never hurt anyone. The detectives asked if she knew about Jenny's other relationships, including the one with David Clark. Judy Ann said she was aware of them and did not feel threatened by them, as her beliefs embraced love in many forms. Despite her calm exterior, Judy Ann's responses raised some eyebrows. She claimed to have spiritual sexual relationships with various celebrities such as Tom Cruise and Oprah, along with historical figures like Jane Austen and Jane Eyre. In fact, she claimed to have had sex with every Jane who had ever lived, which made her seem less credible. The detectives found it hard to take her completely seriously, but continued to probe for any possible motive. The detectives also considered Judy Ann's knowledge of natural substances. They wondered if she could have used her expertise to commit the crime in a unique way. However, the method of murder, a 9mm handgun, did not fit her usual practices. There were no signs of her involvement in acquiring or using a firearm. Judy Ann's calm and cooperative demeanor during the interrogation contrasted with the brutal nature of the crime. She maintained her innocence throughout, expressing deep sorrow for the loss of her friend. The detectives noted her emotional responses, but knew they needed more concrete evidence to rule her out as a suspect. On February 22, 2004, Palm Bay police received a significant breakthrough in the case. It was a sunny, warm afternoon when a local retiree, 98-year-old Maria May Cleaton was cleaning out her garage. While sorting through some old boxes, she stumbled upon a VHS tape without a label. Curious, she decided to play it in her VCR, a Panasonic model she had owned for years. To her shock, the tape contained a homemade adult movie featuring Jenny Braze and David Clark, the local high school principal. Horrified by what she saw and on the verge of having a heart attack, Maria May immediately called the police and handed over the tape. Detectives Carol Heiress and Brielle Honley viewed the tape and were stunned by its contents. The video not only confirmed an affair between Jenny and David Clark, but also suggested a potential motive. The detectives noted the sexually explicit nature of the footage and the fact that it might have been filmed secretly. The discovery of the VHS tape added a new layer to the investigation. The police speculated that the tape could be a motive for murder, either to silence Jenny or to prevent the tape from being exposed. Detective Harrison believed the tape might be the key to solving the case. The police continued to investigate the origin of the VHS tape. They discovered that the tape had been recorded on an old camcorder, a Sony Handycam model. They traced the serial number to a store in Palm Bay, where it was purchased 2 years earlier. The store's records showed it was bought with a credit card belonging to Judy Ann Morton. This new evidence shifted the focus back to Judy Ann. The detectives brought her in for further questioning. Judy Ann maintained her innocence and denied any knowledge of the tape. She suggested that someone might be trying to frame her. The discovery of the VHS tape raised more questions than answers, but it was a crucial piece of evidence. The police knew they had to dig deeper to uncover the truth and bring justice for Jenny Braze. David Clark, the local high school principal, became a key suspect after the discovery of the VHS tape. David, 65 years old, was known for his strict, no-nonsense approach to administration. He had a reputation for being authoritative, often making controversial decisions, like banning books such as Anne of Green Gables and Little House on the Prairie for their perceived erotic content. On February 23, 2004, detectives Carol Harrison and Brielle humbly brought David in for further questioning. The police station was buzzing with activity, and David seemed visibly nervous as he sat in the interrogation room. The detectives presented the sexually explicit VHS tape as evidence, and David's reaction was one of extreme shock and shame. David admitted to the affair with Jenny, but insisted that it was consensual and that he had no part in her murder. He confessed that their relationship had been ongoing for about a year and that they had met in secret to avoid scandal. He explained that the tape was part of a collection of homemade adult movie they had filmed with Judy Ann, acting as director and camera woman, a situation not uncommon in a state where 1 out of every 8 adults have performed in an adult movie. The detectives dug deeper, questioning David about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. David claimed he was at home, grading papers and watching the evening news on WKMG News 6. His wife Heiress confirmed his alibi, stating they spent the evening together. Despite his strong alibi, the detectives remained suspicious. David's demeanor during the interrogation was a mix of fear and defensiveness. He denied any involvement in Jenny's death and seemed genuinely distressed about the accusations. The detectives noted his nervousness and asked if he had any enemies who might want to frame him. David mentioned several parents and staff members who were unhappy with his strict policies, but none seemed likely suspects. The police also investigated David's financial records and phone logs. They found no evidence of financial trouble or suspicious activity. His phone records showed no contact with Jenny on the day of the murder, supporting his claim that they hadn't planned to meet. However, the detectives were not entirely convinced of David's innocence. A sexually explicit tape, his secret relationship with Jenny, and his authoritative nature all pointed to possible motives. They knew they needed more evidence to either clear his name or prove his guilt. As the investigation continued, the community of Palm Bay was left reeling from the revelations. Parents and students at the high school were shocked to learn about David's secret hobby and his affair with Jenny. The detectives were determined to get to the bottom of the case, knowing that every piece of evidence brought them closer to finding Jenny's killer. On February 24, 2004, after days of intense investigation, the police finally identified the murderer, Arthur Braze, Jenny's husband. Arthur, 36, worked at a local pet supply store and was known for his logical and methodical nature. The police pieced together a timeline of events and evidence that pointed directly to him. Arthur discovered Jenny's affairs with David Clark and Judy Ann Morton, which left him feeling utterly betrayed. The emotional turmoil and anger drove him to meticulously plan her murder. His motive was clear: revenge and a desire to expose Jenny's infidelity. On the night of the murder, Arthur left work earlier than he claimed. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed him purchasing a pair of gloves and a bottle of water around 8 p.m. This contradicted his alibi of working late. Additionally, ballistics tests confirmed that the bullets used in Jenny's murder came from the 9mm handgun registered to Arthur, which he claimed had been stolen. The detectives also found traces of gunpowder residue on a jacket in Arthur's closet, further incriminating him. On the sunny morning of February 24, the detectives, armed with an arrest warrant, arrived at Arthur's house. It was a tense moment as they knocked on the door, knowing they were about to confront the prime suspect. Arthur opened the door, looking tired and stressed. When the detectives informed him that he was under arrest for the murder of his wife, he appeared shocked but did not resist. His demeanor was one of resignation, as if he knew this moment was inevitable. The police handcuffed him and led him to the squad car while the neighbors watched in disbelief. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community of Palm Bay. Jenny's family, still grieving her loss, were devastated to learn that Arthur was the murderer. They had trusted him and never suspected he could commit such a heinous act. Their reactions were a mix of sorrow and anger, struggling to understand how someone so close could betray them. As Arthur was taken into custody, the detectives reflected on the complexity of the case. They had uncovered layers of secrets and lies, ultimately leading them to the truth. The evidence was overwhelming, and they were confident they had the right person. The arrest of Arthur Bridezilla brought a sense of closure to the community, but also left many questions about how such a tragedy could occur. The detectives knew that while the arrest was a significant step, the journey to justice for Jenny Bridezilla was far from over. Arthur Bridezilla's trial began on May 15, 2005, at the Brevard County Courthouse. The community of Palm Bay was captivated by the case, which had dominated local news for months. The courtroom was filled with reporters, family members, and curious residents eager to see justice served. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Sarah Gubert, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough and thorough. Gubert argued that Arthur had meticulously planned Jenny's murder out of jealousy and anger over her affairs. She presented the gunpowder residue, the incriminating surveillance footage, and the ballistics evidence as proof. Gubert also highlighted the note written in Jenny's blood, "I am a cheater," as a clear sign of Arthur's motive. The defense attorney, Robert Lackley, was a seasoned lawyer known for his calm demeanor and sharp intellect. Lackley, 50, argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that there was no direct proof linking Arthur to the crime scene at the exact time of the murder. He suggested that someone else could have framed Arthur, pointing out the other suspects, David Clark and Judy M. Wharton, who also had motives. Throughout the trial, Jenny's family sat in the front row, their faces a mix of sorrow and determination. They listened intently as witnesses testified and evidence was presented. The emotional toll was visible, especially when the sexually explicit VHS tape was shown in court, graphically revealing Jenny's affair with David Clark. After 2 weeks of intense testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days. On June 3, 2005, they reached a verdict. The courtroom was silent as the foreman stood to deliver the decision, guilty of first-degree murder. Arthur Bridezilla showed little emotion as the verdict was read, his face pale and expressionless. Arthur was sentenced to 500 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought a sense of relief to Jenny's family, but also a deep sadness that such a tragedy had occurred. The community of Palm Bay reacted with mixed emotions. Some felt justice had been served, while others were still shocked that Arthur, a man they had trusted, could commit such a brutal crime. The case sparked conversations about domestic violence and the hidden lives people lead behind closed doors. After the trial of Arthur Bridezilla concluded in June 2004, the residents of Palm Bay, Florida, began the long process of moving forward. David Clark, the high school principal, faced severe backlash after the trial. His affair with Jenny and the explicit VHS tape had tarnished his reputation. He resigned from his position and moved away from Palm Bay, seeking anonymity in a small town in Georgia. Despite his involvement in the scandal, he was never charged with any crime related to Jenny's death. Judy M. Wharton, Jenny's friend and another suspect, continued her work as a metaphysical surgeon and spiritual healer. Although she was cleared of any wrongdoing, the scandal affected her business. She held a public healing ceremony for Jenny, inviting those who knew and loved her to join in a collective remembrance. This event helped Julianne regain some trust and respect in the community. Arthur Braze, now serving a life sentence without parole, adjusted to life in prison. He participated in counseling and anger management programs, but the weight of his actions haunted him. Occasionally, he wrote letters to his children, hoping one day they might understand his actions, though it seemed unlikely. The trial and its aftermath left a lasting impact on Palm Bay. The community became more vigilant about domestic issues, with local organizations hosting workshops on recognizing and preventing domestic violence. Jenny's story served as a sobering reminder of the importance of open communication and support in relationships. As time passed, the memory of Jenny Braze remained a poignant chapter in Palm Bay's history. The community's resilience and commitment to honoring her legacy ensured that her spirit lived on through the activities and causes she loved. Roger Sheraton was 45 years old and lived in Madison, Mississippi. He worked as a spokesman and chief fundraiser for a charity called A Bucket of Barbecue, which handed out barbecue to poor people. Roger was well known in Madison for his friendly smile and outgoing personality. He often appeared in local newspapers and on TV, talking about the charity's work. Roger lived in a comfortable house on Pine Street with his wife of 8 months, Leanne. They had no children yet, but Roger had a son from his previous marriage to Juniper Sheridan. Roger's home was always neat, and he loved to entertain guests, especially during holidays like the 4th of July. Roger went to Madison High School, where he was a popular student. He was involved in the debate club and played on the basketball team. After high school, he attended the University of Mississippi, where he studied communications. He used his education to help the charity grow, making sure they had enough funds to keep helping the community. Roger was seen as a kind and generous man by many, but those who knew him well saw a different side. He could be controlling and had a bad temper. His first wife, Juniper, often spoke about their difficult 9-year marriage. She said that the abuse started with small things but quickly got worse, turning into physical violence. But people in her small southern suburb did not believe her. They believed she read too many books and had an overactive imagination. Whatever flaws he may have had, Roger had big dreams for A Bucket of Barbecue. In the days before his death, he was busy organizing a large barbecue event for the 4th of July. He wanted to expand the charity's reach and hoped to get more media coverage. He was excited about the event and worked long hours to make it a success. Roger's friends and colleagues described him as a man with two sides. In public, he was charming and helpful. In private, he struggled with anger and control issues. His wife, Leanne, supported him publicly but privately complained to friends about his behavior behind closed doors. Roger's story is a complex one, showing how someone can be both a hero and a villain. However, his life and death left a lasting impact on the community of Madison. On the morning of July 5, 2019, around 7:30 a.m., George Miller, a retired police officer, was taking his usual morning walk in the quiet neighborhood of Madison, Mississippi. The 4th of July celebrations had ended the night before, and the streets were littered with remnants of fireworks and decorations. As George strolled down Pine Street, he noticed an unusual amount of smoke coming from Roger Sheraton's backyard. Curious and concerned, George decided to check it out. Roger's house, known for its neat appearance, now had smoke rising ominously from the back. George walked up to the fence and peeked over. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. Roger Sheraton's head was slumped over the deep fryer, his head submerged in oil, and the fryer was still smoldering. George's training as a former police officer kicked in. He quickly dialed 911, his hands shaking as he reported what he had found. "There's smoke and I think Roger is dead. It looks like a terrible accident or worse," he told the operator. The dispatcher assured George that help was on the way and advised him to stay on the line until the police arrived. George, though shocked and horrified, managed to remain relatively calm. He stayed by the fence, watching to ensure no one tampered with the scene before the authorities arrived. Within minutes, the Madison police arrived, sirens blaring. Officers immediately secured the area, and the fire department was called in to extinguish the smoldering deep fryer. George recounted his discovery to the officers, trying to keep his voice steady. "I was just walking by when I saw the smoke. I looked over the fence and saw Roger. His head was in the fryer. It was awful." They thanked George for his help and asked him to stay nearby for further questions. The scene was chaotic, with officers and firefighters working quickly to secure evidence and put out the remaining smoke. As the fire was brought under control, it became clear that Roger's death was not an accident but a gruesome and deliberate act. The police began their investigation, carefully examining the backyard for any clues that could point to Roger's killer. The discovery of Roger Sheridan's body marked the beginning of a complex and chilling murder case that would soon shake the entire community of Madison. The police arrived quickly at Roger Sheridan's home on the morning of July 5, 2019. Detective Sarah Coleman and her partner, Detective Paul Johnson, led the investigation. Both were experienced detectives known for their thoroughness and attention to detail. When they arrived, they found a chaotic and disturbing scene. The backyard was still smoky, and the smell of burnt oil hung in the air. Roger's body was slumped into the deep fryer, his head badly burned. Blood splatters were visible on the ground and nearby surfaces, indicating a violent struggle had taken place. Detective Coleman directed the officers to secure the perimeter, making sure no one could enter or leave without permission. She and Detective Johnson began their meticulous examination of the scene. They first took photographs from all angles, capturing every detail of the gruesome sight. They collected fingerprints from the deep fryer, the fence, and other objects in the yard. As they moved through the backyard, they noted several items that seemed out of place. A pair of gloves, partially hidden under a bush, caught their attention. The detectives bagged the gloves for further examination, hoping they would provide clues about the killer. The detectives then focused on the deep fryer. It was clear that Roger's death was not an accident. The level of brutality suggested a deep personal motive. They carefully lifted Roger's body from the fryer, noting the extent of his injuries. His face and upper body were severely burned, and there were signs of blunt force trauma, suggesting he had been hit before being placed in the fryer. The forensics team arrived shortly after and began their work. They used luminol to detect any hidden blunt stains and collected hair and fiber samples from the scene. The team also examined Roger's clothing for any additional evidence. Detective Johnson, known for his keen observational skills, found the set of footprints leading away from the deep fryer toward the back gate. The footprints were photographed and measured, giving the police a potential clue about the killer's size and type of shoes worn. By noon, the initial investigation at the crime scene was complete. Detective Coleman and Detective Johnson had gathered a significant amount of evidence, but they knew the real challenge was just beginning. They needed to piece together the evidence and figure out who had the motive and opportunity to commit such a heinous act. The brutal nature of Roger Sheridan's death shocked the community of Madison. News of the murder spread quickly, appearing in local newspapers like the Clarion Ledger and on TV stations such as WOBT. The detectives knew they had to act fast to solve the case and bring the killer to justice. The first suspect in the investigation was Cassandra Barnes. Cassandra was 22 years old and known for her vibrant and outgoing personality. She was often described as the life of the party and known in the tight-knit community to have been having an affair with Roger Sheridan for over a year. However, in recent weeks, she had started to distance herself from him due to his increasingly erratic behavior. Cassandra worked the drive-thru at the local Zaxby's place. She was well-liked by her customers and colleagues, who appreciated her cheerful and friendly demeanor. When Detective Sarah Coleman and Detective Paul Johnson arrived to question her, she was visibly nervous but cooperative. During the interrogation, Cassandra admitted to the affair with Roger but firmly denied any involvement in his murder. She explained that she had been at a friend's house on the night of July 4th, celebrating the holiday and watching fireworks. She provided the names of several friends who could confirm her alibi. Detective Coleman noted Cassandra's calm yet anxious demeanor. She seemed genuinely shocked by Roger's death and expressed sadness over the loss. However, her recent efforts to distance herself from Roger raised suspicions. The detectives asked her about her reasons for pulling away from Roger, and she described his controlling and sometimes frightening behavior. Cassandra mentioned that Roger had become more aggressive in recent months, often calling her late at night asking her to carve his name on her skin with a knife. She said that she had started to fear for her safety and had considered ending the relationship several times. Her fear of Roger gave the detectives a potential motive, but there was no direct evidence linking her to the crime. The detectives decided to verify Cassandra's alibi by speaking with her friends. They also collected her fingerprints and DNA samples to compare with the evidence found at the crime scene. Cassandra's friends confirmed that she had been with them on the night of the murder, watching the fireworks in a park across town. With a solid alibi and no physical evidence tying her to the scene, the detectives had to consider other suspects. Despite her possible motive, Cassandra did not seem to have had the opportunity to commit the crime. As the investigation continued, the police kept a close eye on Cassandra, ensuring that they did not overlook any potential leads. The case was still wide open, and the detectives knew they had to explore every possible angle to uncover the truth behind Roger Sheridan's brutal murder. The second suspect in the investigation was Juniper Sheridan, Roger's first wife. Juniper was 48 years old and lived a few doors down from Roger. She had a reserved and quiet demeanor, carrying the weight of her traumatic past. Juniper worked as a librarian at the Madison Public Library. She was well-liked by the library patrons and her colleagues. When detectives Sarah Coleman and Paul Johnson visited her home, she appeared calm but wary. She knew why they were there. During the interrogation, Juniper opened up and revealed that during their marriage, Roger had been abusive. According to her, the abuse began with spanking and quickly escalated. She described how Roger's vicious and cruel behavior had made her life a living hell. She recounted to police one particularly disturbing episode where Roger started to manically whip her while screaming that she was his carriage horse riding him to hell. She explained that she had left him to protect herself and their young son. Despite the painful memories, she insisted that she had no part in Roger's murder. Juniper told the detectives that she had been at home alone on the night of July 4th, reading and listening to the fireworks in the distance. She said she went to bed early and did not hear or see anything unusual. Her calm and steady demeanor made it difficult for the detectives to determine if she was hiding anything. The detectives found her story plausible but needed more information. They asked her about her relationship with Roger after their divorce. Juniper admitted that Roger had tried to reconcile with her several times, but she always refused. She wanted nothing to do with him after the years of touring. The detectives collected Juniper's fingerprints and DNA samples for comparison with the evidence from the crime scene. They also searched her house for any clues that might link her to the murder. Nothing out of the ordinary was found. To further verify her alibi, the detectives spoke with Juniper's neighbors. They confirmed that Juniper was often seen at home reading or gardening, and that she rarely left the house, especially at night. Her routine and demeanor did not suggest a motive for such a violent crime. Despite her traumatic past and the abuse she had suffered, there was no solid evidence tying Juniper to Roger's murder. Her calmness and willingness to cooperate made it hard to believe she was involved. The detectives had to move on to other suspects while keeping Juniper in mind as the investigation progressed. On the morning of July 6, 2019, the weather in Madison, Mississippi was hot and humid. Detective Sarah Coleman and Detective Paul Johnson were back at the station, sifting through the evidence collected from Roger Sheridan's crime scene. Just as they were feeling stuck, a breakthrough came in the form of new evidence. At around 10 a.m., a neighbor called the police. She said she had found something strange while cleaning her yard. She said lived next door to Roger and had seen the smoke from his backyard on the morning of July 5th. She discovered a small blood-stained handkerchief under a bush near the property line. Detective Coleman and Detective Johnson rushed to Linda's house to collect the evidence. They carefully bagged the handkerchief and sent it to the lab for DNA analysis. They thanked her for her keen observation and told her to let them know if she found anything else unusual. The detectives felt a renewed sense of urgency as they awaited the lab results. When the results came in later that afternoon, they showed that the blood on the handkerchief matched Roger Sheridan's DNA. More importantly, the analysis also revealed DNA from another individual. The detectives immediately compared the new DNA sample with the profiles they had collected from the suspects. The DNA matched Leanne Sheridan, Roger's current wife. This was a significant piece of evidence, pointing towards her potential involvement in the murder. With the new lead, Detective Coleman and Detective Johnson felt they were getting closer to solving the case. They needed to piece together the final puzzle to bring justice to Roger Sheridan and his family. The third suspect in the investigation was Leanne Sheridan, Roger's current wife. Leanne was 30 years old and known for her gentle and nurturing personality. Neighbors often saw her as a devoted wife who cared deeply for her home and garden. However, behind closed doors, she endured Roger's violent and abusive behavior. Leanne worked as a nurse's aide at Madison General Hospital. She was respected by her colleagues and patients for her kindness and dedication. When detectives Sarah Coleman and Paul Johnson arrived to question her again, they had new evidence from the blood-stained handkerchief. Leanne greeted the detectives with a nervous smile. During the interrogation, they presented the handkerchief and the DNA results. Leanne's face went pale, and she struggled to maintain her composure. She confessed to having an argument with Roger on the night of July 4th, but insisted she did not kill him. She recounted the events leading up to the argument. Roger had become increasingly abusive. both physically and emotionally. On the night of July 4th, he tied her to a chair and forced her to watch as he had sex with Cassandra Barnes. This was the final straw for Lynn. When she managed to free herself, she confronted Roger in a rage, beating him until her hands felt numb. She admitted to wiping her blood with a handkerchief after cutting her hand during the struggle. Detective Coleman noted Lynn's mix of fear and anger as she described the abuse. Lynn explained that she felt trapped and desperate. The detectives could see that she had suffered greatly, but they needed to know if she had taken the final step of killing Roger. Lynn's motive was clear. She had endured years of abuse and humiliation, and the events of July 4th pushed her to the edge. However, she continued to deny any direct involvement in Roger's death. Her calm yet shaken demeanor made it difficult to determine if she was telling the whole truth. The detectives collected more evidence from Leanne's home, including her clothing and any items that could be linked to the crime scene. They also spoke with her colleagues at the hospital, who confirmed her stories of stress and fear caused by her husband's behavior. While the evidence against Leanne was mounting, it wasn't conclusive. The detectives knew they had to keep investigating to find the truth. They needed to piece together all the evidence and determine if Leanne's desperation had led her to murder. As the investigation continued, Detective Coleman and Detective Johnson remained focused on uncovering every detail of the case. They hoped to bring justice to Roger Sheridan and his family, and find peace for Leanne and the other victims of Roger's abuse. On July 10, 2019, the Madison police were closing in on their primary suspect. After days of intense investigation, they had enough evidence to identify the murderer. Lynn Sheridan, Roger's current wife, was the prime suspect. She had endured years of abuse and reached her breaking point on the night of July 4th. The final piece of the puzzle came from a neighbor's security camera footage. It showed Lynn entering the backyard around the time of Roger's murder, looking distressed and agitated. This footage, combined with the DNA evidence from the bloodstained handkerchief and her own admission of the intense argument, led the detectives to believe Lynn was responsible for Roger's death. Detectives Sarah Coleman and Paul Johnson, along with a team of officers, arrived at Lynn's house early in the morning. It was around 6 a.m. and the sun was just beginning to rise. They knocked on the door, and Lynn, looking exhausted and defeated, answered. "Lynn Sheridan, you are under arrest for the murder of Roger Sheridan," Detective Coleman said firmly. Lynn didn't resist. She seemed almost relieved as the officers handcuffed her and read her rights. She was taken to the police station for further questioning. During the interrogation, Lynn finally confessed to the crime. She described in detail how the years of abuse had driven her to the edge. On the night of July 4th, after the horrific incident where Roger forced her to watch him have sex with Cassandra, she saw no other way out. She waited until he was alone in the backyard and then attacked him. In a fit of rage and desperation, she dumped his head into the deep fryer, ending his life. Lynn explained that she didn't plan the murder but acted out of a moment of intense fear and anger. She felt trapped and saw no other way to escape the cycle of abuse. Her confession was filled with tears and regret, but also a sense of relief that the nightmare was over. The news of Lynn's arrest spread quickly through Madison. Roger's family and friends were shocked but also expressed a sense of understanding. They knew about his abusive behavior and sympathized with Lynn's plight. The community was divided, with some feeling that justice had been served and others struggling to comprehend the brutal nature of the crime. Roger's family were devastated. They had lost a family member in a horrific way and now had to deal with the fallout of their stepmother being the murderer. The emotional toll was immense. Lynn's arrest marked a significant turning point in the investigation. The police had solved the case, but the impact of the crime would linger in the community for a long time. As Lynn awaited trial, the residents of Madison tried to come to terms with the tragic events that had unfolded. Lynn Sheridan's trial began on September 15, 2019 at the Madison County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious residents. The prosecution was led by District Attorney James Powell, a 50-year-old known for his tenacity and stern demeanor. The defense attorney was Mary Merlette, a compassionate 45-year-old with a reputation for defending victims of abuse. District Attorney Powell opened the case by presenting the evidence. He described the horrific nature of Roger Sheridan's death and showed the security footage of Lynn entering the backyard. He argued that, despite her claims of abuse, Lynn had committed a premeditated murder. Mary Merlette countered by highlighting the years of abuse Lynn had suffered. She painted a picture of a woman driven to the edge by relentless torment. Merlet brought in witnesses, including Leanne's colleagues and neighbors, to testify about the abuse. She argued that Leanne acted in a moment of desperation and should be shown leniency. Throughout the trial, Roger's family watched with mixed emotions. They were heartbroken over his death, but also knew about his violent behavior. The courtroom was tense as both sides presented their arguments. Leanne took the stand and gave a tearful account of her life with Roger. She described the constant fear and the night of the murder in detail. Her testimony moved many in the courtroom, including members of the jury. She explained that she saw no way out and acted to protect herself from further harm. After several days of testimony and arguments, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On September 22nd, they reached a verdict. Leanne was found guilty of second-degree murder. The jury acknowledged her years of suffering, but could not overlook the brutality of the crime. The judge sentenced Leanne to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. He stated that while he understood the circumstances that led to the crime, the law required accountability for such a violent act. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Some felt it was too harsh, considering the abuse Leanne endured. Others believed justice was served. Roger's family had mixed feelings. They were relieved that the trial was over but struggled with the loss and the complicated emotions surrounding it. Leanne's friends and colleagues expressed sympathy for her plight and hoped she would find some measure of peace and rehabilitation during her time in prison. The trial's outcome left a lasting impact on the community. It sparked discussions about domestic abuse and the legal system's handling of such cases. Many hoped that Leanne's story would raise awareness and lead to better support for victims of abuse. After the trial, life moved on for those involved in the tragic case of Roger Sheraton's murder. Leanne Sheraton, now serving her sentence at Mississippi State Penitentiary, began to adjust to life behind bars. She participated in therapy programs aimed at helping inmates deal with trauma and abuse. Leanne's case brought attention to domestic violence issues, prompting local organizations like Safe Haven to offer more support to abuse survivors. The community of Madison slowly returned to its routines, but the memory of Roger's murder lingered. Local businesses like A Bucket of Barbecue, the charity Roger had supported, held fundraisers in his memory. People gathered at Madison City Park, where Roger had often volunteered during community events, to honor his legacy. Detectives Sarah Coleman and Paul Johnson received accolades for their dedication to solving the case. They continued to work on other investigations, but the Sheraton case stayed with them. They remained in touch with Roger's family, providing updates and support as needed. The Madison Police Department implemented new training programs for officers to recognize signs of domestic abuse and respond effectively. They partnered with local shelters and advocacy groups who improved services for victims in need of assistance. As the months passed, the intensity of emotions surrounding Roger's murder began to fade. The anniversary of his death in July 2020 prompted a small memorial at Madison City Park, where friends and community members gathered to reflect on his life and the impact of domestic violence. For Leanne Sheraton and everyone connected to the case, life after the trial was a journey of healing and reflection. The events of July 2019 left an indelible mark on their lives and their community, serving as a reminder of the importance of addressing and preventing domestic violence. This is the story of Adam Johnson, a loving husband and father whose life was tragically cut short in a deadly love triangle. Adam Johnson was a 29-year-old man who lived in Alpharetta, Georgia, with his wife Rebecca and their twin boys Modelo and Reno. Adam was an architect who loved designing buildings that were good for the environment. He wanted to help the planet by creating homes and offices that used less energy and were made from sustainable materials. Adam went to Georgia Tech and graduated with a degree in architecture. He was very proud of his education and often talked about how much he learned there. Adam was working on his first major project when he died. This project was very important to him because he believed it would help make the community a better place to live. Adam's dream was to create beautiful buildings that would last a long time and not harm the environment. He wanted his children to grow up in a world where they could enjoy clean air and natural beauty. He often told his friends about his plans and hopes for the future, sharing his vision of a better world. In the days before his death, Adam was very busy but also very excited. He was working late nights and early mornings to make sure his project was perfect. He often talked to his colleagues about new ideas and ways to improve his designs. He even stayed up late reading the latest architecture magazines to stay informed about new trends and technologies. Adam lived in a nice neighborhood in Alpharetta, where people knew each other and felt safe. He liked to jog in the mornings and was often seen at the local Starbucks, where he would get his favorite drink, a caramel macchiato. He also enjoyed watching football games on TV and was a big fan of the Georgia Bulldogs. Adam's personality and dreams made him a special person. He was loved by many and had big plans for the future. His dedication to his work and his family showed how much he cared about making the world a better place. Adam's tragic death was a shock to everyone who knew him, as it ended the life of a man who had so much more to give. On August 15, 2013, at around 9:00 a.m., the body of Adam Johnson was discovered in his home in Alpharetta, Georgia. The person who found him was his neighbor, Josephus Matthews. Josephus often checked in on the Johnson family because they were good friends and lived next door. That morning, Josephus noticed that the front door of the Johnson house was slightly open, which seemed strange. Feeling uneasy, he decided to go inside and see if everything was okay. As Josephus entered the house, he called out Adam's name, but there was no answer. He walked through the hallway and into the living room, where he made a horrific discovery. Adam was blindfolded and tied to a chair, with multiple stab wounds all over his body. The room was a mess with blood on the floor and walls, indicating a violent struggle had taken place. Josephus was in shock and couldn't believe what he was seeing. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone to call 911. The operator answered, and Josephus tried to stay calm as he described what he had found. His voice trembled, but he managed to give the operator all the necessary details. He said, "I'm at my neighbor's house and he's been stabbed. He's tied to a chair, and there's blood everywhere. Please send help quickly." The police arrived at the scene within minutes. They found Josephus standing in the hallway, visibly shaken. The officers asked Josephus to wait outside while they secured the scene. As they moved through the house, they noted the signs of a struggle and the violent nature of the attack. The paramedics arrived soon after the police and confirmed that Adam was dead. Josephus was asked to give a statement about what he had seen and how he had found Adam. He described how he had entered the house, found the body, and immediately called 911. Josephus was still in shock and had a hard time processing what had happened. He kept repeating, "I can't believe this. Adam was such a good man." The news of Adam's death spread quickly through the neighborhood. People were shocked and saddened to hear that such a kind and caring person had been murdered in such a brutal way. The local news stations like WSB-TV began reporting on the crime, and the community was left in a state of fear and disbelief. The discovery of Adam Johnson's body marked the beginning of a tragic and complex investigation. On the morning of August 15, 2013, the Alpharetta police quickly arrived at the scene where Adam Johnson's body was found. Brother and sister police team officers Clarissa Brown and Dean Davis were among the first responders. They were known for their thoroughness and dedication. Officer Brown, a seasoned detective with a calm demeanor, and Officer Davis, a younger but highly observant officer, were both shocked by the brutality of the scene. The crime scene was in Adam's living room. Blood was splattered across the floor and walls, and it was clear that a violent struggle had taken place. Adam was found blindfolded and tied to a chair with multiple stab wounds. The most severe wound was a single fatal stab to the heart. This indicated that the attack was personal and not a random act of violence. The detectives began their investigation by securing the crime scene and making sure no evidence was disturbed. They used yellow crime scene tape to cordon off the area and started taking photographs of the scene from every angle. They collected samples of the blood found at the scene, hoping to find DNA evidence that could lead them to the killer. Officer Brown noticed a partially burned note in the fireplace. She carefully retrieved it with tweezers and placed it in an evidence bag. The note appeared to be a letter from Adam, expressing his intention to leave his wife Rebecca and take custody of their children. This piece of evidence suggested a possible motive for the crime. The detectives also used luminol to check for any hidden bloodstains. Luminol is a chemical that glows when it comes into contact with blood, even if the blood has been cleaned up. They found more bloodstains leading from the living room to the kitchen, indicating that the struggle might have started there. Officer Davis checked the doors and windows for signs of forced entry but found none. This suggested that Adam knew his attacker and had let them into the house willingly. The police also dusted for fingerprints and collected any that they found, hoping to match them to a suspect. The police worked tirelessly to gather all possible evidence. They interviewed neighbors, including Josephus Matthews, who had discovered the body. Josephus described Adam as a friendly and caring person who had no known enemies. This made the crime even more puzzling. As the day turned into night, the police continued their investigation, determined to find justice for Adam Johnson. The crime scene was gruesome, and the detectives knew they had a tough case ahead. They hoped the evidence they gathered would lead them to the person responsible for this horrific crime. Rebecca Johnson, Adam's 27-year-old wife, was the first suspect in the investigation. Rebecca was known for being creative and outgoing, with a vibrant social life. However, her relationship with Adam had been strained for some time. Friends and family mentioned that she seemed unhappy and distant, and rumors about her having an affair were common. Rebecca was a part-time artist who enjoyed painting and attending Loglard events. Raised Methodist, she was also recently involved with a group called Zen and Philosophy. This group claimed to be a spiritual community, with its teachings based on the 1999 Disney Channel original movies and a girl of the 21st century. Others simply called it a cult. Well, we'll let you decide.
Hello, I am Maureen Zaftrapines, agent of Lady Zinnan Carr. Today I invite you to explore Zinnan philosophy, a futuristic vision and a prophecy of humanity's evolution towards cosmic enlightenment. Through chanting of Lord Protozo's sacred lyrics, we attune our souls to the cosmic frequencies, preparing ourselves for the journey towards higher realms of existence. Our sacred branding of the letter Z symbolizes our commitment to Zinnan philosophy as we embark on the path of spiritual enlightenment. We are not just individuals, but a cosmic community united by our shared vision. As we journey towards the stars, let us embrace the teachings of the Zinnan philosophy, for within its wisdom lies the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe and the boundless potential of our souls. May the light of Lady Zinnan guide us on our cosmic voyage. Cetus Lupitus.
Anyway, Rebecca's sudden interest in Zen and philosophy worried her friends and family. They felt she was becoming more withdrawn and influenced by the group's teachings. When the police questioned Rebecca, she appeared anxious and evasive. She admitted that her marriage to Adam was troubled and confessed to having an affair with Jimmy Lewis Carter, a 23-year-old ex-football player at Georgia Tech. Rebecca explained that she met Jimmy through Zen and philosophy and that they had become close. She bluntly said Jimmy was much better in bed than her husband. Despite this admission, Rebecca denied any involvement in Adam's murder. During the interrogation, Rebecca's nervousness was evident. She fidgeted with her hands and avoided eye contact with the detectives. Officer Brown asked Rebecca about the night of the murder, but her answers were vague and inconsistent. Rebecca claimed she was at home alone, which the police found suspicious given the nature of her relationship with Adam. The detectives also questioned Rebecca about the partially burned note found in the fireplace. The note indicated that Adam planned to leave her and take their children, Modelo and Reno. When asked about this, Rebecca became visibly upset and started to cry. She insisted that she did not know about Adam's plans and that she would never harm him. The police searched Rebecca's phone and computer, looking for any clues. They found numerous text messages between her and Jimmy, discussing their relationship and their dissatisfaction with their current lives. However, there was no direct evidence linking Rebecca to the murder. Rebecca's involvement with Zen and philosophy also raised questions. The group had a reputation for encouraging extreme behavior among its members. The detectives wondered if the group's influence had played a role in Adam's death. They decided to investigate further, looking into the activities and teachings of Zen and philosophy. Despite her nervous demeanor and inconsistent statements, there was not enough concrete evidence to arrest Rebecca at that time. The police continued to investigate other leads and suspects, hoping to find the truth behind Adam Johnson's tragic death. Jimmy Lewis Carter, a 23-year-old ex-football player at Georgia Tech, was the second suspect in Adam Johnson's murder case. Known for his charisma and athleticism, Jimmy had a history of short-term relationships. He was identified as Rebecca Johnson's lover and was the one who introduced her to the Zinnan philosophy group. This group, often considered a cult, had a significant influence on both Rebecca and Jimmy. When the police brought Jimmy in for questioning, he appeared calm and confident. His relaxed demeanor contrasted sharply with the serious nature of the investigation. Detective Clarissa Brown and Officer Dean Davis conducted the interview, hoping to learn more about his relationship with Rebecca and his possible involvement in Adam's death. Jimmy was cooperative and answered all the questions without hesitation. He admitted to having an affair with Rebecca and confirmed that they met through Zen and philosophy. Jimmy described Rebecca as someone who was unhappy in her marriage and looking for something more in life. He claimed that their relationship was purely emotional and physical, with no intention of causing harm to anyone. Detective Brown asked Jimmy about his whereabouts on the night of August 14, 2013. Jimmy confidently stated that he was with a friend at a local Longhorn steakhouse and provided the names of several friends who could confirm his alibi. The police followed up on this information and found that his alibi checked out. Jimmy was indeed at practice, far from the scene of the crime. Despite his solid alibi, the detectives pressed Jimmy further, trying to uncover any additional information. They asked him about Zen and philosophy and its influence on him and Rebecca. Jimmy explained that Zen and philosophy was about finding inner peace and spiritual enlightenment. He denied that the group had any radical or violent teachings. The detectives also asked Jimmy about the text messages between him and Rebecca. The messages showed their dissatisfaction with their current lives and hinted at plans for the future. Jimmy explained that they were just talking about their dreams and aspirations, not planning anything harmful. Throughout the interrogation, Jimmy remained composed and dismissive of the police's suspicions. He showed no signs of guilt or nervousness, which made the detectives wonder if he was telling the truth or just a very good liar. However, without concrete evidence linking him to the crime, they had no choice but to let him go. As Jimmy left the police station, the detectives continued to feel uneasy. His confidence and cooperation were unusual for someone under suspicion of such a serious crime. While they could not detain him, Jimmy remained a person of interest in the investigation. The police continued to gather evidence, hoping to find the truth behind Adam Johnson's tragic death. On August 20, 2013, 5 days after Adam Johnson's body was found, the Alpharetta police received a crucial tip. It was a hot, humid afternoon when a local resident called the station. She had found something suspicious while walking her dog, Michael Cartino Winchester, in a nearby park. The park was a popular spot in Alpharetta, known for its scenic trails and family-friendly atmosphere. Emma described finding a bloody knife hidden under some bushes near the edge of the park. The knife seemed out of place, and she immediately thought it might be connected to Adam's murder. Officer Dean Davis and Detective Clarissa Brown rushed to the park to investigate the tip. They arrived at the scene and carefully retrieved the knife, placing it in an evidence bag to avoid contamination. Back at the police station, forensic experts examined the knife. They discovered traces of Adam's blood on the blade and a partial fingerprint on the handle. The fingerprint was sent to the lab for analysis. The detectives hoped it would match someone in their database or one of their suspects. The discovery of the knife was a significant breakthrough in the case. The police felt a renewed sense of urgency as they waited for the lab results. 2 days later, on August 22, the lab results came back. The fingerprint on the knife matched Karen Blanchard, Rebecca Johnson's best friend, and a member of Zen philosophy. Karen was known for her aggressive behavior and strong loyalty to Rebecca. The police immediately brought her in for questioning. The discovery of the knife and the fingerprint evidence put Karen under intense scrutiny. The police believed they were closer to solving the case, but they needed more information to piece everything together. They continued to investigate Karen's involvement, hoping to uncover the full truth behind Adam Johnson's murder. Karen Blanchard, Rebecca Johnson's best friend, became a primary suspect after her fingerprint was found on the knife used to kill Adam Johnson. Karen, a 28-year-old with a history of aggressive behavior, was fiercely protective of Rebecca. She was also an ex-lover of Jimmy Lewis Carter and a member of Zen philosophy. On August 22, 2013, after the fingerprint analysis, Detective Clarissa Brown and Officer Dean Davis brought Karen in for questioning. Karen, known for her strong-willed personality, initially tried to maintain her composure. However, the evidence against her was mounting, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. During the interrogation, Karen admitted to having sex with Rebecca but denied any involvement in Adam's murder. She claimed that the knife must have been planted to frame her. Detective Brown, with her calm and methodical approach, pressed Karen for more details about her activities on the night of August 14. Karen's story was inconsistent. She initially claimed to be at home alone, but later admitted to meeting with Rebecca and Jimmy. She described the meeting as a casual get-together, insisting they only discussed their frustrations with their current lives. However, the detectives were skeptical, especially given her strong loyalty to Rebecca and the presence of her fingerprint on the murder weapon. Karen's involvement with Zen philosophy also raised red flags. The group, often viewed as a cult, had a reputation for promoting extreme loyalty among its members. Detective Brown asked Karen if the group had influenced her actions, but Karen vehemently denied it, saying Xenon philosophy was about finding inner peace, not violence. As the questioning continued, Karen became more agitated. Her defensive behavior only increased the detective's suspicions. Officer Davis, known for his sharp observational skills, noticed Karen's hands trembling slightly, a sign of her growing anxiety. The police also searched Karen's home, looking for any additional evidence. They found several items linking her to Rebecca and Jimmy, including text messages and meeting notes related to Xenon philosophy. While these items did not directly implicate Karen in the murder, they showed the close connection between the three suspects. Despite Karen's denials, the evidence against her was compelling. The fingerprint on the knife, her inconsistent alibi, and her aggressive loyalty to Rebecca all pointed to her potential involvement in Adam's death. The detectives believed Karen knew more than she was willing to admit and continued to apply pressure, hoping she would crack under the weight of the evidence. The investigation into Karen Blanchard was a crucial step in solving the case. The police were closer than ever to uncovering the full story behind Adam Johnson's tragic death, but they needed to keep pushing to find the final piece of the puzzle. On August 25, 2013, after a thorough investigation, the police finally identified the murderer, Rebecca Johnson. The breakthrough came when detectives uncovered a series of deleted text messages on Rebecca's phone. These messages, recovered by forensic experts, revealed her desperation and fear of losing her children. Adam had discovered her affairs with Jimmy and Karen and planned to leave her, taking custody of their children, Modelo and Reno, because he did not want them to be raised in Xenon philosophy. On the night of August 14, Rebecca had confronted Adam about his plans to leave. A heated argument ensued, escalating into a violent struggle. In a fit of rage and desperation, Rebecca blindfolded Adam, tied him to a chair, and stabbed him multiple times, delivering a fatal wound to his heart. She then attempted to stage the scene to look like a home invasion gone wrong. Detective Clarissa Brown and Officer Dean Davis pieced together the timeline of events from the recovered messages and other evidence. They presented their findings to the district attorney, who issued a warrant for Rebecca's arrest. On the morning of August 26, the police arrived at Rebecca's home. It was a tense moment as they knocked on the door. Rebecca answered, appearing calm but visibly nervous. The officers informed Rebecca of the charges against her and placed her under arrest. She was shocked and initially denied everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. As she was led away in handcuffs, her neighbors watched in disbelief. The once vibrant and outgoing woman was now at the center of a horrific crime. Rebecca's arrest brought a mix of emotions to the community. Adam's family, devastated by his loss, felt a sense of relief knowing the murderer had been caught. However, the revelation that Rebecca was responsible for his death added another layer of pain. Rebecca's children, Modelo and Reno, were taken into the care of Adam's parents. The community rallied around the family, offering support during this difficult time. The local news stations covered the arrest, highlighting the tragic turn of events. The investigation had been long and complex, but the dedication of Detective Brown, Officer Davis, and their colleagues ensured that justice was served. The evidence, combined with Rebecca's actions and the recovered messages, painted a clear picture of her guilt. Rebecca's arrest marked the end of a dark chapter in Alpharetta. The community hoped for healing and justice for Adam Johnson and his family. Rebecca Johnson's trial for the murder of her husband Adam began on November 15, 2013, in the Fulton County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like WSB-TV and concerned residents of Alpharetta. The trial drew significant attention due to the shocking details of the case. The prosecution, led by District Attorney James Morgan, age 45, presented a compelling argument. Known for his thorough and determined approach, Morgan meticulously laid out the evidence against Rebecca. He detailed the affair with Jimmy Lewis Carter, her involvement with Karen Blanchard, and the influence of Xenon philosophy. He highlighted the recovered text messages, the forensic evidence, and the violent nature of Adam's murder. The defense, led by attorney Laura Simmons, age 38, attempted to paint a different picture. Simmons, known for her empathetic yet assertive style, argued that Rebecca was a victim of emotional abuse and manipulation. She claimed that Rebecca acted in self-defense and that her involvement with Xenon philosophy had clouded her judgment. Simmons tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's timeline and the reliability of the recovered messages. Throughout the trial, Adam's family sat in the courtroom, visibly distressed by the proceedings. Jane and Robert Johnson, Adam's parents, watched every detail unfold with a mix of sorrow and anger. Their presence reminded everyone of the human cost of the crime. The jury deliberated for 2 days before reaching a verdict. On December 2, 2013, they found Rebecca Johnson guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Rebecca showed little emotion, staring blankly ahead. During sentencing, the judge addressed the court. She emphasized the gravity of the crime and the impact on Adam's family and the community. "This was a senseless act driven by fear and desperation," she said. Rebecca was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rebecca's conviction and sentencing were seen as a fair resolution by most, though some felt sympathy for her, considering the emotional turmoil she had been experiencing. The trial's outcome provided a measure of justice for Adam Johnson and his family, allowing them to begin the long process of healing. After Rebecca Johnson was sentenced to life in prison without parole, the lives of those involved in the case changed drastically. Adam Johnson's family, still grappling with their loss, tried to find a new sense of normalcy. Jane and Robert Johnson, Adam's parents, took in their grandchildren, Modelo and Reno. The children, now under their grandparents' care, slowly adjusted to their new life. The Johnsons received overwhelming support from the Alpharetta community. Local groups and neighbors organized fundraisers and events to help the family. Rebecca's incarceration left a void in the lives of her children. Despite the severity of her crime, they were allowed occasional supervised visits to the prison, arranged by Child Welfare Services. These visits were emotionally challenging, as the children struggled to understand why their mother was behind bars. Jane and Robert Johnson did their best to provide a stable, loving environment for Modelo and Reno, shielding them from the media frenzy surrounding the case. Jimmy Lewis Carter, Rebecca's lover and a central figure in the investigation, faced his own set of challenges. The media attention affected his football career at Georgia Tech. Although he was not charged with any crime, his involvement with Rebecca and Xenon philosophy raised questions about his character. Jimmy decided to leave Georgia Tech and transferred to a smaller university to escape the scrutiny and rebuild his life. Karen Blanchard, Rebecca's best friend, also faced public backlash. Her aggressive defense of Rebecca and her involvement in the Xenon philosophy group made her a controversial figure. After the trial, Karen distanced herself from the group and sought therapy to deal with the emotional fallout. She moved to a different state, hoping for a fresh start away from the memories of the case. Life after the trial was a period of adjustment and healing for everyone involved. While the pain of Adam Johnson's death could never be erased, his family and the community worked together to honor his memory and move forward. The story of Adam Johnson and the tragic events of August 2013 left an indelible stain on Alpharetta, reminding all of the importance of justice and community support in the face of tragedy.